1947, a Bedouin shepherd threw a stone into a cave and heard something shatter. He climbed in to look. What he found in that cave would spend the next 70 years rearranging what scholars thought they knew about the Bible, about prophecy, and about a Jewish prophet named Enoch, who walked with God before the flood. Among the fragments of parchment recovered from Cave 4 at Qumran was a text so old, so layered, so precise, that archaeologists called it unlike anything else in the collection. It was a code, not a cipher, a living code, written entirely in animals. Tonight, you and I are going to decode it together. My name is Pastor Michael, and for more than 20 years I have sat with the Ethiopian Bible, the full canon, the expanded canon, the one that contains 68 books instead of the 39 most of the world was handed. The text we are reading tonight is called The Animal Apocalypse. It is found in the Book of Dream, Visions, chapters 83 through 90 of the Book of Enoch. In it, every human being, every nation, every king, every angel is represented by an animal. And when you learn the code, when you finally see what Enoch saw, you will understand not just ancient history, you will understand tonight. Let us begin with the Ge'ez word that holds this entire vision together. The word is Velm. In Ge'ez, the sacred language in which this text was preserved, Velm means dream, not an ordinary dream, a dream that arrives as a gift, a visitation, something placed in the sleeping mind by a will greater than your own. Enoch had two of them. Both of them changed the world. Before we go deeper, if this is bringing you peace tonight, consider subscribing so the next voice you hear in the darkness is one you recognize. You don't have to do anything right now, just a quiet tap. And here is a question I want you to carry into sleep tonight. What part of your own story do you most need to see from the outside? The way Enoch saw all of history from the eye of a dream? Let that question breathe. We will return to it. Velm, the Ge'ez word for dream. A vision dreams something sent, not sought. In the Ethiopian Orthodox lectionary, the Book of Dream Visions, 1 Enoch 8390, is classified as Shehuf Kedus, holy writing, and has been read aloud in monasteries since at least the 5th century CE, when Abba Salama first translated portions of the Enoch corpus into Ge'ez from an Aramaic-based text. Modern neuroscience now identifies a specific dream state, the hypnagogic threshold between waking and sleeping, as the moment when the brain's default mode network is most active, producing symbolic, narrative visions. Enoch's two dreams occur at precisely this threshold. Tonight we are entering one of the most layered texts ever composed in the ancient world. Let me give you its architecture before we enter it, because understanding the shape of it will help you rest inside it. The Book of Dream Visions is actually two separate visions, two nights, two encounters given to the same young man, standing at the edge of two different catastrophes. The first vision is found in 1 Enoch, chapters 83 and 84. Enoch is young. He has just learned that a flood is coming, that the world he knows will be destroyed by water. He wakes from the dream trembling. He runs to his grandfather, Mahalalel, and collapses at his feet. Mahalalel doesn't comfort him the way you might expect. He doesn't say, "It was just a dream." He says, "Rise up and pray." Because if God shows you destruction in a dream, the correct response is intercession. Enoch rises. He prays through the night. He asks God not to destroy all flesh. He asks that a remnant survive. And the flood still comes, but the remnant survives. That first vision is relatively short, 2 chapters. It establishes a pattern. God shows Enoch the worst. Enoch prays. Something survives. The second vision is where everything changes. The second vision begins in 1 Enoch 85, and it does not end until chapter 90. 6 chapters. Approximately 2,000 years of human history, compressed into a single dream. And it is written entirely in the language of animals. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry in the casual sense. The animal apocalypse is a sustained, deliberate allegory, an encoded history in which every human group, every dynasty, every angel, every messiah is assigned a specific animal identity, and you can only understand what you are reading if you know the code. Before this section ends, you will hear the name of the animal that represents the people of God, the ones you would have been if you were living in Enoch's vision of human history. Let me lay out the basic architecture of the code. In the animal apocalypse, human beings are portrayed as bulls and sheep. The very first human Adam is a white bull. Eve is also described as a white heifer. Cain and Abel appear as black and red bulls. Seth, through whom the righteous lineage flows, is another white bull. The nations of the world, as they spread out after the flood, they become all manner of wild animals. Lions, wolves, jackals, foxes, eagles, each one carrying specific symbolic weight. The people of Israel descended from Abraham become sheep, not because they are weak, because they are domestic, tended, under a shepherd's care. And therein lies the genius and the tragedy of the vision. The sheep Israel are supposed to be shepherded by God, but at a specific moment in history, God withdraws direct supervision and hands the task over to 70 angelic shepherds. 70. And those 70 shepherds, each one assigned a period of time, a generation, an era, fail. Every single one of them fails. Some of them are negligent. Some of them are actively cruel. Some of them allow predators into the flock and look the other way. And the entire time, a written record is being kept. This is one of the most remarkable details in the entire text. As the 70 shepherds do their work, or fail to do their work, an angelic scribe is recording everything. Not for punishment yet, just for record. The account is sealed. It will be opened at the final judgment, and when it is opened, the shepherds who failed are judged not by the harm they did, but by the difference between what God commanded them to do and what they actually did. The gap between the command and the performance. That is what they are judged on. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Not in a frightening way, in a liberating way, because the text is not saying that history is chaos. It is not saying that the powerful always win, and the suffering never ends. It is saying every era of human history has a supervisor. Every supervisor has a command. Every deviation from that command is recorded, and the recording will be opened. This is the core theological claim of the animal apocalypse, and it is a claim that the Ethiopian church has taken seriously for 1,500 years. In the Ethiopian Orthodox liturgy, this passage from 1 Enoch 89 is referenced in the commentary tradition as proof that angelic accountability is real, that history is not random, and that the suffering of the righteous has a witness. The white sheep do not go unnoticed. The Book of Dream Visions was written for people who felt forgotten, and it says, "You are not forgotten. There is a book. There has always been a book." Before we move forward, let me ask you something quiet. Is there a chapter of your own life where you felt like no one was watching, no one was recording, and so nothing you endured would ever matter? The animal apocalypse was written for that feeling, not to explain it away, but to tell you that feeling is wrong. The scribe has always been writing Sarat Ge'ez for form or figure used in Ethiopian exegetical tradition to describe allegorical representation, the outer form carrying an inner truth. Ethiopian scholar monks Debteras use the concept of Sarat extensively when commenting on the animal apocalypse, noting that each animal form in 1 Enoch 8590 was chosen not arbitrarily, but to match the spiritual character of the human or group. It represented domesticity, wildness, predation, purity. Contemporary literary scholars call this same technique zoomorphic allegory, the use of animal forms to encode social or political commentary in ways that would be opaque to hostile readers but transparent to initiated insiders. The animal apocalypse is one of the oldest surviving examples of this technique in world literature. Let us read the code from the beginning. 1 Enoch 85 opens with a remarkable image. Enoch sees a white bull. The bull is vigorous, powerful, walking across a great open field. A white heifer walks beside him. This is Adam and Eve. But notice what Enoch emphasizes: the whiteness. In the color symbolism of the animal apocalypse, white signals purity, not perfection, but original alignment with the divine intention. Adam is white because at the beginning, human nature was oriented toward its source. Then the heifer gives birth to 2 bulls, one dark, one red. Cain and Abel. The dark bull pursues the red bull. The red bull falls, and something shifts in the vision. As the red falls, the white bull, Adam, grieves, and the color of the first dark bull deepens. It becomes black. Sin, in this vision, is not just an act. It is a transformation of color, a darkening of original whiteness. The vision continues through the antediluvian generations. The lineage of Seth, the third son, the righteous line, is depicted as producing more white bulls. But as the generations pass, something curious happens. The white bulls begin to produce bulls of mixed colors. Then, the mixed bulls produce animals of entirely different species. By the time we reach the generation before the flood, the sons of God the Watchers appear as stars descending. They take on animal form. They couple with the sheep, and from those unions come hybrid creatures, giants, depicted as monstrous animals that consume the sheep. This is the pre-flood catastrophe, as told through animal vision. And it mirrors the account in 1 Enoch 6:11, but filtered through Enoch's dreaming mind, making it feel personal, embodied, close. By the time in this documentary, you will know exactly which animal Moses is in Enoch's vision, and why that choice is so surprising. After the flood, Noah appears. Noah is a white bull. The ark saves him and his family. And from Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, 3 new cattle emerge. But only one of them remains white. The other 2 shift color. They become the nations of the world. Not all livestock, not all tended. Some become wild. And from the white cattle of Shem's lineage, the great drama continues. The cattle eventually produce through a long chain of generations. A lamb, not a bull, a lamb. Abraham is a lamb. This is the moment when the allegory shifts. Register. God's chosen line stops being depicted as cattle and becomes something smaller, more vulnerable. A flock of sheep. And the sheep are beautiful in the vision. They are described as bright-eyed. They are tended carefully. They follow, but they are vulnerable in a world of lions and wolves. Isaac is a white sheep. Jacob is a white sheep. The 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes, are 12 lambs. And the entire history of Israel from this point forward is told through what happens to those 12 lambs and their descendants, the sheep. Now, Moses, Here is where the animal apocalypse surprises everyone who reads it carefully. You might expect Moses to be depicted as a great white ram, a powerful leader, a patriarch figure, the way Abraham was depicted. But in 1 Enoch 89-1:8, Moses appears as a sheep who is transformed. He is a lamb who ascends a height, who goes up onto a mountain and comes back changed. The text doesn't give him a new animal identity. It says something more interesting. The Lord of the sheep calls to him from the mountain, and he speaks with the Lord face to face. And from that point on, Moses is the sheep through whom the Lord's voice comes. He is not the shepherd. God is still the shepherd. Moses is the voice bearer, the one who translates the shepherd's will to the flock. I find this deeply moving because in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, Moses is venerated not as a ruler, but as a translator, a mediator, someone whose face shone because he had been in the presence of light, and the light got on him. That is what the animal apocalypse says too. Moses is not white because he is perfect. He is illuminated because he has been near the source of illumination. The sheep cannot see the Lord of the sheep directly, but they can see Moses. And Moses reflects enough of the light that the sheep can navigate by it. There is something tender in that, something that most of us who lead in any capacity, who teach, who parent, who pastor, understand at a level deeper than theology. You are not the light. You are the face that got close enough to carry it. The animal apocalypse tells us that leadership is not dominion. It is proximity to the source, and the willingness to let that proximity show on your face. Nugs gaze for king. But in the animal apocalypse commentary tradition, it carries the specific meaning of the one who rises from the flock without divine appointment. A king by human acclamation, not necessarily by divine mandate. The Debteras of the Debre Libanos monastery tradition drew a sharp distinction between divinely appointed leaders, Moses, Joshua, and humanly chosen kings, Saul, using the term nugs to describe the second category, ones who ascend through political process rather than prophetic commissioning. The animal apocalypse depiction of the period of the judges in early monarchy directly addresses the tension between charismatic spiritual leadership, who sees visions, and institutional political leadership, who commands armies, a tension still unresolved in modern, theocratic and democratic societies. After Moses, the flock of sheep crosses the wilderness. The animal apocalypse follows them across the desert years, a period depicted as the sheep wandering through wild territory, occasionally attacked by wolves and jackals, occasionally protected by the Lord's intervention, but always moving toward something, toward the land that had been promised. Joshua is barely mentioned. The entry into the land happens quickly in the vision, almost like a door opening. The sheep move through. The land receives them, and then begins the most turbulent period of the vision, the era of the judges. In the animal apocalypse, the period of the judges is depicted as the sheep left largely without a consistent human shepherd. The Lord of the sheep still watches from a distance. The angelic scribe still records, but the sheep themselves cycle through a terrible rhythm. They scatter. They are attacked. They cry out. Help comes. They are gathered. They forget. They scatter again. The text doesn't belabor this. It doesn't editorialize. It simply depicts the pattern with a kind of compassionate flatness, the way you might describe the ocean's tides. This is how it goes. This is how it always goes, until something changes. What eventually changes is a demand. The sheep ask for a king. In the animal apocalypse, this is depicted as a profound moment of transition, not necessarily a failure, but a turning point that carries consequences. The first king Saul appears as a ram, large, strong, impressive. He leads the flock against the wolves. He wins battles. But he does not stay close to the Lord of the sheep. He begins to act on his own authority. And gradually, the ram's whiteness begins to fade. This is the subtle genius of the animal apocalypse's color language. It does not say Saul sinned and was immediately destroyed. It shows a gradual fading, the white becoming gray, the gray becoming darker, until the ram who was once bright is no longer recognizable as the Lord's anointed. Then comes a new ram, smaller, quieter, from a different part of the flock. David, in the animal apocalypse, David is not described with triumphant language. He is a young ram who begins to grow. The Lord of the sheep turns his gaze specifically to this one. And in the Ge'ez manuscript tradition, particularly the 15th century Heikyū Codex, there is a phrase in the commentary on this section that has no parallel in the Greek or Aramaic fragments. It reads, approximately, "And the Lord smiled at that one." Stay with me, because next I will show you something about the animal apocalypse that no one in most Western churches has ever been taught. A detail preserved only in the Ge'ez manuscripts. That phrase, "the Lord smiled at that one," is not in the Dead Sea Scrolls fragments of this passage. It is not in the Greek Acme manuscript. It is only in the Ge'ez. And the Ethiopian Orthodox scholars who preserved it did not treat it as an interpolation. They treated it as the original because they had the full text. The canonical Ethiopian version of 1 Enoch, preserved in the Ge'ez language, in manuscripts stretching from the 5th to the 18th centuries, is the only complete version of this book that exists anywhere on Earth. The Dead Sea Scrolls fragments are significant, but they are fragments. The Aramaic Qumran materials cover perhaps 40% of the animal apocalypse. The Ge'ez manuscripts cover 100%. This is why the Ethiopian canon matters, not as a novelty, not as an alternative, but as the only surviving complete witness to one of the oldest and most theologically sophisticated texts in the entire Jewish Christian tradition. After David, the vision continues through Solomon, depicted as a white ram who builds a great tower, the temple, but whose later years show a gradual mixing. Other animals begin to appear around the ram, and the tower is surrounded by darkness. This is not anti-Solomonic polemic. The vision is simply honest about what happened. Solomon built the house. Solomon also opened doors, and when the doors opened, wolves came in. The division of the kingdom is depicted as a splitting of the flock. One group goes north, one group stays. The wolves attack both. The prophets Elijah, Elisha, Isaiah, Jeremiah appear as white sheep who cry out warnings. Some of the flock listens. Most do not. And then comes the exile, Babylon. In the animal apocalypse, the Babylonian captivity is depicted as the sheep being given over to lions. The Lord of the sheep does not intervene. He watches from a distance, and the angelic scribe continues to write. It is here, at this moment of exile and apparent abandonment, that the vision introduces its most extraordinary theological concept, the 70 angelic shepherds. When the sheep are given over to the nations, when the direct divine supervision appears to withdraw, God does not abandon the flock entirely. He appoints 70 angelic beings to serve as supervisors, period by period. Each shepherd is given a specific number of sheep to oversee. Each shepherd is given a specific command. Harm this many no more. Let this many survive. And each shepherd exceeds the command. Every single one of them. They allow more harm than they were permitted to allow. They let more sheep die than God assigned to die. And the scribe writes it all down. History is not random. It is audited Every excess of cruelty above the permitted measure, recorded. Saba Arayat, Ge'ez compound. 70 plus guardians, shadows, the Ethiopian scholarly term for the 70 angelic shepherds of 1 Enoch 8990. The 70 shadow guardians, angelic beings assigned to oversee periods of human history from a semi-hidden position. The number 70 carries specific weight in Second Temple Jewish thought. Deuteronomy 32:8. Dead Sea Scrolls version reads, "He set the boundaries of the nations according to the number of the sons of God, and the traditional count of nations in the Table of Nations, Genesis 10, is 70. The Animal Apocalypse draws on this tradition to propose that the 70 nations of the post-flood world correspond to 70 angelic supervisors of Israelite history. This concept that specific angelic intelligences are assigned to supervise specific geopolitical entities appears in Daniel 10:13, the Prince of Persia, the Prince of Greece. In 1 QM, the War Scroll from Qumran. In Revelation's 7 letters to 7 churches, and in the Ethiopian theological concept of guardianship angels assigned to churches, families, and nations, the Animal Apocalypse is the most fully developed version of this theological framework in any ancient text. Let me tell you something that will take a moment to settle in. The Animal Apocalypse does not present the 70 shepherds as villains. It presents them as failures. There is a difference. A villain chooses evil from the beginning. A failure begins with an assignment, a trust, a command, and then, one by one, over time, in ways both small and catastrophic, fails to keep it. The 70 shepherd passages in 1 Enoch 89 and 90 are among the most psychologically nuanced in all of ancient literature, because each shepherd is not presented as identical. Each one has a different relationship to the command. Some fail quickly, some fail slowly, some let in predators through carelessness, some let in predators through corruption, some simply abandon the flock when it becomes dangerous to stay. But all of them, at the final accounting, are found to have exceeded the permitted harm. The scribe brings his sealed records before the Lord of the sheep. The Lord opens them. He reads what each shepherd was commanded, and what each shepherd actually permitted. And then the Lord weeps. This is one of the most startling verses in the entire book of Enoch. The Lord of the sheep weeps, not in surprise, not in anger exactly, in grief. The text suggests that the Lord already knew. He knew what the shepherds would do. He allowed the process to unfold. He kept the record, and then he weeps, because the permission to suffer is not the same thing as indifference to suffering. I want to stay with that for a moment, because this is a pastoral insight of the highest order. There is a difference between God allows this to happen and God does not care that this is happening. The Animal Apocalypse insists on that distinction with great force. The Lord of the sheep watches. The Lord of the sheep keeps the record. The Lord of the sheep grieves. The flock does not weep alone. By the end of this segment, I will tell you which of the 70 shepherd periods most scholars believe corresponds to the moment you are living in right now. The 70 shepherds are divided into 4 groups in the text. Scholars have debated the exact historical correspondence for centuries, but the most widely accepted reading goes like this. The enemy nations, the predators, become white like the sheep they once destroyed. This is not the image of victory over enemies. This is the image of enemies transformed into friends, of predators restored to their original purity, which, in the logic of the Animal Apocalypse, means restored to their original alignment with the divine intention. The white bull of Eden, the white of the beginning, coming back at the end. And then, from the transformed flock, a great white bull is born. And the text says he is a mighty wild bull, larger than anything the vision has shown before, with great black horns. This, in the language of the animal apocalypse, is the Messiah, not depicted as a lamb, not as a sheep, a white bull, which means the Messiah restores the original identity of Adam, the fullness of human nature undarkened, undiminished, returning to the point before the first darkening of Cain. And when the nations, the transformed animals, see the white bull, they are afraid. And then they are not afraid, and the vision ends. I will give you 10 seconds of silence now, not to think, just to let that image rest inside you. A world where the predators become white, where the old enmity ends, where the last shepherd gives his final account and is replaced by no shepherd at all, because the Lord himself has come to dwell among the flock. Mattathias Maccabee, the patriarch who sparked the Maccabean revolt in 167 BCE by refusing to sacrifice to Zeus at Modin. His name means gift of God. In Hebrew, a name that carries heavy irony for a man who received the gift of watching his nation's sacred temple desecrated. Antiochus IV Epiphanes, king of the Seleucid Empire, entered the Jerusalem temple in 167 BCE, sacrificed a pig on the altar, installed a statue of Zeus, and outlawed Jewish religious practice. This event, called the Abomination of Desolation in Daniel 11:31, was the immediate political context in which the animal apocalypse was composed. The text's author was almost certainly a member of the Hasidim, the pious ones, the forerunners of the Essenes who used animal allegory to describe events too dangerous to name openly. The animal apocalypse was written under conditions of religious persecution, a context that makes it directly resonant for any community that has experienced forced assimilation, sacred space, desecration, or the suppression of religious identity. The Ethiopian Church's preservation of this text was not accidental. The Ethiopian community had its own long history of surviving under religious pressure. The year is 167 BCE. Jerusalem is under occupation. The Seleucid king Antiochus IV, who called himself Epiphanes, God made manifest, has already looted the temple treasury. He has already massacred those who resisted. And now he has gone further. He has entered the Holy of Holies. He has slaughtered a pig on the altar of burnt offering. He has erected a statue, and he has issued a decree: no Sabbath observance, no circumcision, no Torah reading, no memory. In the villages of Judea, men and women face a choice: comply and live, resist and die. And in a town called Modin, an old priest named Mattathias watches as another Jewish man walks up to comply with the order to sacrifice at a pagan altar, and Mattathias kills him. Then he kills the king's officer. Then he flees into the hills with his 5 sons. This is the beginning of the Maccabean revolt. It will last 25 years. It will produce the only successful revolutionary restoration of a temple in the ancient world, and somewhere in that chaos, on a scroll, by lamplight, in a community of pious scholars who could not say what they meant openly, someone was writing the animal apocalypse. The code was necessary. You could not write, Antiochus is a tyrant who desecrated the temple. If that scroll was found, you were killed. But you could write. A great horn attacked the sheep. It scattered the flock. It removed the tower. It placed an abomination where the sacred place had been. Anyone who knew the code understood. Anyone who did not know the code saw only an odd dream about animals. This is one of the most sophisticated uses of encoded literature in world history, and it is important for you to understand this. not as a curiosity, but as a pastoral truth. The people who wrote this text were not hiding because they were cowards. They were hiding because they were survivors. They were writing under conditions where truth could get you killed, and they chose to write anyway. The animal apocalypse depicts the Maccabean crisis in 1 Enoch 90 to 917. A great horn grows on one of the sheep. The sheep rally around that horn. The horn begins to push back the wolves and the ravens and the eagles. The flock gathers. The tower begins to be restored. This is Judas Maccabeus and his brothers. The great horn is their leadership. The rally of the sheep is the Maccabean coalition. But even here, the vision is not triumphalist. The text does not say, "And the sheep defeated the wolves forever." It says, "And the sheep fought, and the Lord of the sheep came and helped them." And then the transition to the final vision. The author of the animal apocalypse seems to have been writing during the revolt, perhaps even during the rededication of the temple in 164 BCE. The text knows about the Maccabean resistance, but it does not know how it ends politically. What it knows is how it ends cosmically. The political battle is a signal, a harbinger, of the final transformation. The restored temple, for this author, is a shadow of the heavenly temple. The Maccabean victory is a sign of what God will ultimately do, but it is not the ultimate doing. Stay with me. You will understand exactly why this text was classified as dangerous by the Roman Church and why Ethiopia kept it alive. After the Maccabean period, the animal apocalypse was cherished by the Essenes, the community at Qumran, who copied it carefully in multiple manuscripts, fragments of which survive to this day. But when the Council of Laodicea in 363 CE and the Council of Carthage in 397 CE codified the Western Christian biblical canon, 1 Enoch was excluded. The reasons given were varied. Some said the book was too apocalyptic, too political. Some said it had been corrupted by later editions. Some said the angel theology was incompatible with emerging orthodoxy. But the effect was clear. Within a century of its canonical exclusion, 1 Enoch virtually disappeared from the Western Christian world. All manuscripts, all copies, all commentaries, gone, except in one place, Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, which had received Christianity in the 4th century through Frumentius of Tyre, had already incorporated 1 Enoch into its full canonical list. And when the rest of the Christian world forgot, Ethiopia remembered. Not out of stubbornness, not out of ignorance of the Western councils, but because the Ethiopian Church's relationship with this text was older and deeper than any decision made in Laodicea or Carthage. The Ge'ez manuscripts of 1 Enoch, including the animal apocalypse, were copied again and again, century after century, in monasteries along the Blue Nile, around Lake Tana, in the mountains of Tigray. While the rest of the Christian world lost this key, Ethiopia kept turning it in the lock. What survives is what someone chose to protect. What we have tonight is what those monks chose to copy in cold scriptoriums, by butter lamplight, on the sides of mountains that the empires never found. 4Q 204. The scholarly designation for the Qumran manuscript fragment designated Codex Enoch C, which contains portions of the animal apocalypse, Cave 4, Qumran, document 204, one of several Enoch fragments discovered in 1947 and published progressively from 1976 to 2000. The 4Q 204 fragment dates to approximately 150 BCE and represents one of the oldest surviving physical witnesses to the animal apocalypse text. It was written in Aramaic, which scholars believe was the original language of composition on parchment made from animal skin, and stored in a sealed jar in Cave 4 at Qumran, where it survived for approximately 2,000 years in the dry desert climate. The publication of the Dead Sea Scrolls fragments of 1 Enoch, particularly by Joseph Mielik in 1976, and the subsequent scholarly debate, confirmed that the animal apocalypse was not a medieval Ethiopian invention, but an ancient Second Temple text with direct manuscript witnesses predating Christianity. This vindicated the Ethiopian Church's long claim that 1 Enoch was genuinely ancient and genuinely canonical. For most of Christian history, if you were a Western theologian, and someone told you that the Ethiopian Bible contained a book called 1 Enoch, your likely response would have been, "That's a medieval edition. A local tradition, not ancient." That response was understandable before 1947. It was untenable after it, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, and specifically when the Enoch fragments were identified, catalogued, and published. The scholarly world had to reckon with something extraordinary. The animal apocalypse, which Western Christianity had forgotten, which the Ethiopian Church had preserved alone, was genuinely ancient, genuinely pre-Christian, genuinely a product of Second Temple Jewish thought. Let me be specific about what was found. At Qumran, the following Enoch-related manuscripts were recovered: 4Q201, 4Q202 fragments of the Book of the Watchers, 1 Enoch 136, 4Q204 fragments of the Book of Dream Visions, including portions of the animal apocalypse, 4Q205, 6, 7 additional Enoch fragments, 4Q212 fragments of the Epistle of Enoch, 1 Enoch 91, 108. These manuscripts represent perhaps 5 to 8 separate copies of different sections of 1 Enoch, which means the Book of Enoch was not a marginal text at Qumran. It was one of the most copied texts in the entire collection. Only the Psalms and Deuteronomy were more numerously represented. But here is what the Qumran fragments cannot do. They are fragments, significant fragments, some covering multiple chapters, but fragments nonetheless. The animal apocalypse spans chapters 85 through 90 of 1 Enoch, 6 complete chapters. The Qumran fragments cover perhaps half of that material, with gaps, damage, and reconstruction uncertainties. By the time we finish here, you will know exactly how many fragments of the animal apocalypse were found at Qumran, and why that number still leaves the Ethiopian manuscripts as the only complete version. The Qumran 4Q204 manuscript specifically covers portions of 1 Enoch 85 to 3, 87 to 4, 89 to 16, and 89 to 3137, 3 distinct windows into the 6-chapter animal apocalypse. The rest, including the crucial passages about the 70 shepherds, the final judgment of the shepherds, the transformation of the animals, and the great white bull at the end, exists in physical manuscript form only in Ge'ez, only in Ethiopia. This is not a small thing. The Ge'ez manuscripts of 1 Enoch that survive today include at least 4 complete copies of the entire text, the most important being the Kebron Codex, Kebron Gabriel Monastery, Lake Tana, the Ruppel Codex, now in Frankfurt, the Kebron Nagast manuscript tradition, and the manuscript tradition underlying the 1821 English translation by James Bruce and later Richard Lawrence. James Bruce, the Scottish explorer, brought his Ge'ez manuscript of 1 Enoch to Europe in 1773. He was laughed at. He was told the book was a fraud. He was told the Ethiopians had invented it. He died before the vindication came. In 1821, the first English translation was published by Richard Lawrence, Archbishop of Cashel, from the Ge'ez manuscript. The scholarly world was cautiously interested. In 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. In 1976, Joseph Mielik published the Aramaic Enoch fragments, and James Bruce was vindicated from his grave. There is a word for this in Ge'ez: tzedku, righteousness or justification, the vindication that comes after waiting. Sometimes the record is opened in your lifetime. Sometimes it is opened 2 centuries after you die, but it is opened. I tell you this not as a historical footnote. I tell you this because there are things in your life that have not yet been vindicated. Truths you hold that others have dismissed. Gifts you carry that the current world does not have room for. The manuscripts of one Enoch waited 2,000 years to be confirmed by a Bedouin shepherd's thrown stone. Your waiting, whatever its length, is not wasted. May the patience of those monks, those who copied in the cold, who lit butter lamps in mountain caves, who believed in the value of what they were carrying, rest on you tonight. You are carrying something real. Let it rest with you until morning. Asael, a distinct figure from Azazel, appearing in the animal apocalypse, one of the star angels who descends in 1 Enoch 86:1. The name means God has made, emphasizing the being's created status even as it transgresses its creaturely limits. In the animal apocalypse, 1 Enoch 86, the Watchers are depicted as stars falling from heaven and transforming into bulls who corrupt the cattle people of the earth. This imagery directly parallels the imagery in Luke 10:18. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven, and Revelation 12:7. 9. The war in heaven, dragon, and angels falling to earth. The thematic connection between falling stars, descending angels, and cosmic corruption is one of the most consistent threads linking 1 Enoch to New Testament apocalyptic literature. The question of whether New Testament authors knew and used 1 Enoch is now widely accepted in scholarship. The most definitive case being Jude 14:15, which quotes 1 Enoch 1-9 verbatim. But the influence runs deeper than direct quotation. The entire theological atmosphere of the Gospels, particularly in their angelology and eschatology, is saturated with imagery and concepts first developed in 1 Enoch. Let me tell you something that takes most people by surprise. The first time they hear it, the book of Enoch is directly quoted in the New Testament. Not alluded to, not loosely echoed, directly quoted. In the letter of Jude, the short epistle near the end of the New Testament, verses 14 and 15 contain these words: Enoch, the 7th from Adam, prophesied about these people. See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones, to judge everyone, and to convict all of them, of all the ungodly acts they have committed in their ungodliness, and of all the defiant words ungodly sinners have spoken against him. This is a verbatim quotation of 1 Enoch 1-9. The author of Jude, writing in the 1st or 2nd century CE, knew 1 Enoch, cited it as prophecy, attributed it to Enoch, the 7th from Adam. This is not background noise. This is canonical text. But the connection between the animal apocalypse specifically and the New Testament goes deeper than Jude. Let me show you 3 places. Before we move past, I will show you 3 specific New Testament passages where Jesus appears to be directly quoting the animal apocalypse. First, the Good Shepherd discourse. In the Gospel of John, chapter 10, Jesus says, I am the Good Shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. Compare this with 1 Enoch 89 to 12:15. And the Lord of the sheep came to those sheep and called them all and led them. But the wolves began to devour those sheep, and the hired hands who were over them fled. The imagery is not coincidental. The structure, good shepherd, hired hand, abandonment, wolf attack, is identical. And the context in both texts is the same. A flock of vulnerable people, insufficiently protected by those assigned to protect them, dependent finally on the direct intervention of the Lord himself. Second, the Son of Man at the judgment. In Matthew 25 to 31:46, the parable of the sheep and the goats, the Son of Man comes in glory, separates the nations as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats, and judges based on how they treated the vulnerable. The animal apocalypse ends with precisely this image. The Lord of the sheep on a throne, the records of the 70 shepherds opened, judgment rendered based on how they treated the vulnerable flock, in excess of their permitted harm. The structure, throne, nations gathered, separation into categories, judgment based on treatment of the vulnerable appears in both. Third, the white bull and the Son of Man. This is the most subtle connection. In 1 Enoch 90 to 37:38, the Messiah appears as a great white bull, a figure who restores the original Adamic dignity, who transforms the predators into friends, who closes the gap between creation's beginning and its healing. In Mark 14 to 62, before the high priest, Jesus is asked if he is the Messiah. He answers, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, and coming on the clouds of heaven." The title Son of Man comes from Daniel 7:13-14. But the composite image, the coming figure who transforms nations, who sits in judgment, who restores the original order, draws on both Daniel and 1 Enoch simultaneously. Scholars like George Nicholsburg, Matthew Black, and most recently Lawrence Stuckenbrook have argued persuasively that Jesus' self-identification as Son of Man would have been understood by his audience not only through Daniel, but through the Enochic tradition, including the animal apocalypse's Great White Bull and the Book of Parables' Elect One. The people who heard Jesus say Son of Man in the first century were not hearing a modest, evasive title. They were hearing a title laden with eschatological freight, drawn from the most important visionary literature of their generation. When the Ethiopian Orthodox Church says that 1 Enoch is canonical, that it belongs in the same collection as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it is making this claim. You cannot fully understand what Jesus was doing without knowing the tradition Jesus was working within. 1 Enoch is not the foundation of the New Testament, but it is the soil, and no serious gardener ignores the soil. Which image is living in you tonight? The great white bull, the Adamic restoration, the predators becoming white, the flock that was scattered, gathered again. Let one of these find its place in your heart before you sleep. Zelot Ge'ez for prayer or intercession, specifically the active pleading on behalf of others before the face of God. The act of standing between the danger and the beloved, speaking to the one who can change what is coming. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, intercessory prayer tzelot holds a place of extraordinary theological importance. The practice of praying the Psalms, the Ethiopian Psalter, called the Dawit, is recited in full once a week in the monastic tradition, is understood as participation in the same intercession that Moses made, that Enoch made. The that Mary makes before Christ. The Book of Dream Visions, 1 Enoch 83-84, is the oldest surviving Jewish text to describe prophetic intercession as the correct response to a vision of judgment. Intercessory prayer traditions in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, particularly the night prayer vigil called Taitu, have continued unbroken from the early Christian era to the present day. Monks at Debre Damo Monastery, perched atop a sheer cliff in Tigray, still rise at 2 a.m. for prayer, following a pattern established by the Aksumite Church in the 5th century. Before the animal apocalypse begins, before the great symbolic drama of the sheep and the wolves and the 70 shepherds, there is a smaller, quieter moment in chapter 83. Enoch is young. He has had his first dream, the flood vision. He has seen the earth tilted on its side. He has seen trees falling and stones rolling and darkness covering everything. He wakes from the dream terrified. And then he does something that I believe is one of the most significant moments in all of visionary literature. He doesn't analyze the dream. He doesn't write it down. He doesn't find a teacher to explain it. He runs to his grandfather. He runs to Mahalalel, his grandfather, and collapses. And Mahalalel says, "Tell me what you have seen." Enoch tells him, and Mahalalel's response is striking in its simplicity. He doesn't offer comfort in the form of denial. It was just a dream. It means nothing. He doesn't offer comfort in the form of theology. God would never really do that. He says, "Rise up and pray. Pray that you might remain in the world. Pray that a remnant survive." Enoch rises. He faces the sun, the direction from which light comes. He prays. And the prayer he prays in chapter 84 is one of the most beautiful in the entire Enoch corpus. "Blessed be you, O Lord, King, great and mighty in your greatness, Lord of the whole creation of heaven, King of kings and God of the whole world. And your power and kingship and greatness abide forever and ever, and your dominion throughout all generations. All the heavens are your throne forever, and the whole earth is your footstool forever and forever and ever. For you have made all things and rule over all, and nothing is too hard for you." And then, "Now the angels of your heavens are guilty of trespass, and on the flesh of men shall your wrath abide, until the great day of judgment. And now, O God and Lord and great King, I implore and beseech you to fulfill my prayer, to leave me a generation of the world, and not destroy all the flesh of men. Stay with me." By the final moments of this section, I will share with you the single most important prayer posture in the entire Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, and why it comes from this passage in Enoch's first dream. The prayer posture Enoch takes in this passage, facing the direction of light, speaking directly to the Creator, acknowledging both the holiness of God and the failure of the angels, asking not for his own preservation, but for the preservation of a remnant. This is the structural model for intercessory prayer in the Ethiopian Orthodox theological tradition. In the Ethiopian Church, the highest form of prayer is not petition. It is intercession. Not bless me, not even forgive me, but let something survive that would not survive without this prayer. Mahalalel knew this. He knew that the dream Enoch had received was not for Enoch alone. It was for the world. And the correct response to a dream about the world is to pray for the world, not to analyze, not to argue, not to despair, to pray. The monks at Debre Damo, that ancient monastery on the clifftop in Tigray, accessible only by rope because there is no other way up, have prayed through the night for 1,500 years. They rise at 2 a.m. They recite the Dawit, the full Ethiopian Psalter. They pray the Tselot, the intercession. They ask not for themselves. They ask for a remnant every single night. There is a man there right now. You will never meet him. He does not know your name, but he is praying for you. He is part of the unbroken chain of intercession that began when a young man ran to his grandfather in a dream and said, "I have seen the worst." And his grandfather said, "Rise up and pray." That is the theology of intercession that flows from this text. Not optimism, not denial, not even faith in the sense of certainty, just the willingness to rise and stand between the danger and the beloved and speak to the one who can change what is coming. Rise up and pray. Face the light. Name what you have seen. Ask for a remnant. That is enough. It has always been enough. The flood still came, but the remnant survived. Fegre Ge'ez for love or longing. Specifically the love that runs through the animal apocalypse as the Lord of the sheep watches his flock fail and scatter and be devoured, and yet never looks away. Love as sustained attention. The refusal to stop watching even when what you see is painful. Ethiopian Orthodox theologians, beginning with Abba Georgis of Sagla in the 14th century, identified the Lord of the Sheep's persistent watching in the animal apocalypse as a theological statement about divine love, that God's love is demonstrated not primarily in the absence of suffering, but in the refusal to be absent from it. This tradition influenced the Ethiopian understanding of Christ's suffering in the Psalms of Devotion, the Argonono Wedeze, Harp of Praise. Contemporary grief research has identified witnessed grief, the experience of having one's suffering seen and acknowledged by another, as one of the most powerful healing forces available to humans. The animal apocalypse theological claim that the Lord of the Sheep watches and weeps is, in modern psychological terms, a statement about witnessed suffering. Your pain is seen. The great white bull at the end of the vision is not the absence of suffering, it is the witness who stayed until the end. We have arrived at the end of the dream. Enoch has seen everything. He has seen Adam and Eve. He has seen Cain and Abel. He has seen the flood, the patriarchs, Moses, the judges, the kings. He has seen the exile. He has seen the 70 shepherds fail. He has seen the Maccabean revolt, the great horn, the pushing back of wolves. And now he sees the transformation. 1 Enoch, 90 to 28:36. A new house replaces the old. It is larger. It is more beautiful. It comes from a different direction, not built by human hands. The Lord of the Sheep enters it. And all the sheep, all the scattered, wounded, tired, half-consumed sheep are gathered inside it. And then the animals outside, the wolves, the foxes, the ravens, the eagles, all the ones who had been predators, all the ones who had devoured the flock across centuries. They begin to change. Their colors shift. The darkness drains out of them. One by one, they become white. The animal apocalypse does not explain how this happens. It does not offer a theology of transformation. It simply shows it. The predators become white. The enemies become the same color as the flock they once destroyed. And in that whiteness, there is a recognition. They were always, at their origin, white. The darkness was an overlay, a corruption, not their deepest nature. As this portion comes to its end, you will understand why the animal apocalypse's image of the Messiah is more radical than any other ancient Jewish messianic image, and why it matters for your theology tonight. The ancient world had many visions of the Messiah. Some expected a great warrior king, the son of David, who would defeat the enemies militarily. Some expected a priestly Messiah who would restore pure temple worship. Some expected a prophet greater than Moses. Some expected a combination of all three. The animal apocalypse offers something that none of these images fully captures. A white bull, born from the transformed flock, larger than everything, with great black horns. Not a warrior, not a priest, not a prophet, a restoration. The Messiah in the animal apocalypse is the return of Adam, the undoing of the first darkening, the restoration of the original white. And crucially, he does not come to defeat the enemies. He comes after the enemies have already been transformed. The Messiah arrives in a world that has already been made white. His arrival is not the beginning of healing. His arrival is the completion of healing. This is a radically different messianism from the one most of the Western Church inherited. Western Christianity, shaped by centuries of Augustine, Aquinas, and Reformation theology, tends to think of the Messiah's work as the decisive event that makes transformation possible. The animal apocalypse proposes something different. Transformation comes first, in stages, over time, through the suffering and resistance of the flock, through the failed shepherds, through the Maccabean horn, and the Messiah's arrival is the final crystallization of what has already been happening. I find this extraordinarily comforting. It means that what is happening in your life right now, the difficult parts, the parts that feel like wolf attacks, the parts where the shepherds failed you, all of it is part of the becoming white. The transformation is not waiting for a single decisive moment. It is happening now, in stages, in you. The great white bull is born from the flock, from within the community of the suffering and the persevering, not dropped from outside, not imposed from above, born from within. You are allowed to let this rest inside you tonight. The image of the white, the original whiteness, before the darkening, still there, underneath everything. You don't have to earn it back. You just have to stop running from the one who kept watching. Timkat, the Ethiopian Orthodox Feast of Epiphany, celebrated on January 1920, in which the taboo, ark replica, is carried in procession to a body of water, blessed, and worshippers are sprinkled or submerged. Baptism, or immersion, from the Ge'ez root, meaning to be plunged into, carrying the theological connotation of passing through and emerging, changed. Historical context. The Timkat festival is one of the oldest continuously celebrated Christian feast days in the world, predating the Gregorian calendar reform. The theology of Timkat immersion, restoration, re-whitening, directly parallels the animal apocalypse's imagery of the predators becoming white. Ethiopian theologians have explicitly connected these two texts. The Timkat immersion is understood as a personal enactment of the cosmic whitening that the animal apocalypse describes. Each year, more than 500,000 worshippers gather in Gondar's royal enclosure to celebrate Timkat, making it one of the largest Christian gatherings in Africa. In 2019, UNESCO inscribed Timkat on its representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The theology driving it is rooted in the same tradition that preserved the animal apocalypse for 2,000 years. The Ethiopian Orthodox calendar contains more feast days than almost any other Christian tradition. There are feasts for Mary, for the apostles, for the saints, for the angels, for the patriarchs, for the mysteries. But of all of them, the one that carries the deepest connection to the theology we have been exploring tonight is Timkat. Timkat, the Feast of Epiphany, is celebrated every year on January 19th and 20th, following the Julian calendar. It begins the night before, when the tablets, the sacred ark replicas, one for each church, each representing the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God, are carried out of their sanctuaries. They are wrapped in elaborate cloths. They are placed on the heads of priests, and they are carried in procession through the city, singing, dancing, drums, incense, all the way to a body of water. They camp there through the night. The priests pray through the darkness, and at dawn, At the first light of the day, the water is blessed, and the people go in. They wade into the blessed water, some fully submerged, some sprinkled, all of them, in the theology of Timcat, reenacting the moment of their baptism, the moment of their original becoming white. As this chapter draws to a close, I will show you how a single verse from the animal apocalypse became the theological foundation for one of the most beautiful feast days in the Ethiopian Orthodox calendar. The verse is 1 Enoch 90:38. And all that had been destroyed and dispersed, and all the beasts of the field, and all the birds of heaven, assembled in that house. And the Lord of the sheep rejoiced with great joy, because they were all good, and had returned to his house. In the Ethiopian exegetical tradition, specifically in the Andemta commentary, on the Enoch text preserved in Ge'ez manuscripts from the 14th century, this verse is cited as the scriptural basis for the Timcat theology, the return of the scattered sheep to the house, the rejoicing of the Lord, the assembled creatures restored to goodness. This is what Timcat enacts. When worshippers enter the water at Timcat, they are not simply performing a ritual, they are enacting the prophecy. They are stepping into the story of the animal apocalypse. The scattered sheep returning to the house, the predators becoming white, the rejoicing of the Lord. Every Timcat is a small eschatology, a small end of all things, a small preview of the transformation the animal apocalypse describes. I have had the privilege of attending Timcat once in my life. I stood at the edge of the water at Gondar before dawn. The tablet was there on its platform of cloth, surrounded by singing. 500,000 people around me, the smell of incense and water and night air. And when the priest lifted his hand over the water and blessed it, there was a silence, not the absence of sound, a different kind of silence. The kind the text describes just before the house is filled, and then the singing resumed, and the people went in. I wept, not from sadness, from recognition, because I understood, in that moment, that all of this, the animal apocalypse, the 70 shepherds, the great white bull, the monks at Debre Damo praying at 2 a.m., was never about information. It was always about this, the moment the scattered flock comes home, the moment the Lord of the sheep rejoices, the moment the water that covered creation becomes the water that restores it. I want you to know something. Whatever drove you to press play tonight, whatever tired you out, whatever left you hollow, whatever you could not name, but only feel, the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition would look at you and say, that is a sheep returning to the house. You are not lost. You are on your way back. The Lord is already rejoicing. I want to share something with you. There are Sundays when I finish preaching, and I walk to my car, and I sit in the parking lot, and I realize not one person asked how I was. Everyone needed something from the sermon. No one wondered what it cost. I am not saying this as a complaint. I am saying it because if you are someone who holds others, a caregiver, a parent, a pastor, a friend who always listens, this particular quiet, the animal apocalypse was written for that quiet too. Enoch prays for the whole world, and then he goes alone to his room. You are not forgotten in your loneliness. The scribe is still writing, Aramaic Enoch, the ancient Semitic manuscript tradition underlying both the Dead Sea Scrolls fragments and the Ge'ez translation. Enoch, in Aramaic, carries the same meaning as in Hebrew, trained, or dedicated, from the root HNK, suggesting one consecrated for a specific purpose. The dominant scholarly position, established by Joseph Milik and later refined by Lauren Stuckenbrook and George Nicholsberg, holds that the original animal apocalypse was composed in Aramaic in the 2nd century BCE. It was then translated into Greek, of which almost no manuscripts survive, and from Greek into Ge'ez. However, recent studies of the Ge'ez text have found evidence that the Ethiopian translators also had access to the Aramaic directly, producing a translation that in some passages is closer to the Qumran Aramaic fragments than the assumed Greek intermediary. The debate over the linguistic history of 1 Enoch has significant implications for textual scholarship. If the Ge'ez was translated partly from Aramaic directly, the Ethiopian manuscripts may preserve a more ancient textual tradition than previously assumed, making the Ethiopian canon not just a theological treasure, but an archaeological one. The story of how the animal apocalypse traveled across languages is itself a kind of miracle, not miraculous in the sense of supernatural intervention, but miraculous in the sense of improbability. How does a text survive? Not by being famous, not by being popular, but by finding a community that believes it matters and copying it again and again until the day arrives when the world catches up. The original animal apocalypse scholars are now fairly confident was composed in Aramaic. Aramaic was the common language of Jewish Palestine in the Second Temple period. It was the language Jesus spoke. It was the language of the synagogue, the marketplace, the household, and it was the language of the pious scholars who wrote their most dangerous thoughts in the form of animal dreams. From Aramaic, the text was translated into Greek. This was the standard route of Jewish literature reaching the wider Hellenistic world. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, was made in Alexandria, Egypt, in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE, and along with the Hebrew scriptures, many related Jewish texts were translated into Greek for the expanding Jewish diaspora. 1 Enoch was among them. As this section wraps up, you will know which ancient language scholars now believe. The original animal apocalypse was composed in, and why that language is surprising. The Greek translation of 1 Enoch, known as the Akhmim manuscript, survives only in fragments. A significant portion of the Book of the Watchers was preserved in Greek, but the animal apocalypse? Almost nothing. So from Greek, the text passed into Ge'ez. The Ethiopian Church received its Christianity in the 4th century CE, largely through the work of Frumentius, a Syrian Christian from Tyre, who was shipwrecked on the Ethiopian coast, rose to become a tutor in the Aksumite royal court, and eventually became the first bishop of Aksum, consecrated by Athanasius of Alexandria. Frumentius and the 9 saints who followed him brought not only the New Testament, but a broad range of Jewish and Christian literature, including 1 Enoch. And crucially, and this is the detail that changes everything, they may have brought not only the Greek version, but the Aramaic version. Recent comparative analysis by scholars at the University of Hamburg's Enoch Seminar has found that the Ge'ez text of the animal apocalypse preserves readings that are closer to the Qumran Aramaic fragments than to what would be expected from a Greek intermediate translation. This means the Ethiopian manuscripts may be a more ancient witness than they appear to be. Not medieval editions, not local inventions, not corrupted copies of a Western original, but perhaps the oldest complete text stream of the animal apocalypse in any language anywhere in the world. Let me say that again in a different way. The Ge'ez manuscripts, sitting in Ethiopian monasteries today, in climate-controlled libraries at Debre Libanos, in the treasury churches around Lake Tana, in the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, may represent the most ancient surviving transmission of one of the oldest texts in the entire biblical tradition. The monks who copied them did not know they were preserving archaeology. They thought they were preserving scripture. And they were right. They were doing both. The language of the original Aramaic is now the language of the Qumran fragments. The language of transmission, Ge'ez, is the language that carried the complete text to the present. Two rivers, one source, one ocean of meaning. Sometimes the oldest things are the ones that traveled furthest and arrived in places no one expected. You are part of that transmission tonight. The words you are hearing passed through Aramaic, through Greek, through Ge'ez, across 2,000 years of copying hands, to reach you in this moment. That is not nothing. Kerbet, Ge'ez, for drawing near or approach. The term used in Ethiopian monastic spirituality for the practice of lectio divina, slow, meditative reading of a sacred text as a form of prayer, drawing near to the text, as though drawing near to a fire not to consume but to be warmed. The Kerbet practice in Ethiopian monasticism differs from Western lectio divina in one key respect. It is explicitly performed with the body as well as the mind. The monk who practices Kerbet stands, sways gently, breathes in rhythm with the text, and allows the sound of the words to become a kind of music. This practice is described in the 14th century Ge'ez manual of monastic practice, the Fikare Jesus, Love of Jesus, attributed to Yared the hymnist's school. Research on sleep and reading suggests that slow, rhythmic reading of meaning-rich text before sleep, particularly text with a narrative structure and clear imagery, activates the brain's default mode network in a way that promotes restful hypnagogic dreaming rather than anxious rumination. The Kerbet practice, developed in Ethiopian monasteries 1,500 years ago, anticipates modern sleep hygiene research. We are approaching the end of the main teaching tonight, and before we move into the sleep narration, before we let the imagery world do its work, I want to give you something to carry. Not a new concept, not another piece of information to process, a practice. In the Ethiopian Orthodox monastic tradition, the practice of Kerbet, drawing near, is described as the way to make a text your companion, not your subject. When you study a text, you stand outside it and examine it. When you practice Kerbet, you step inside it and let it breathe. Here is how to apply Kerbet to the animal apocalypse tonight. As you fall asleep, choose one image from what you have heard. Perhaps it is the white bull walking across the open field. Perhaps it is Enoch running to his grandfather with the dream still vibrating in him. Perhaps it is the 70 shepherd periods, the scribe writing everything down. Perhaps it is the predators becoming white. Perhaps it is the monks at Debre Damo rising at 2 a.m. in the dark. Just one image. Before we enter the sleep transition, I want to give you a specific practice drawn from the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition of Kerbet that will help you carry the animal apocalypse into your dreaming mind tonight. Step 1. Hold the image. Not analyze it, not decode it. Just hold it the way you hold a warm stone. Step 2. Breathe with it. One slow breath in, one slow breath out. The image doesn't change. You just breathe beside it. Step 3. Let it settle. As you breathe, the image will naturally descend from the active mind, the analytical mind, down into the softer layers where the hypnagogic state lives, where dreams are formed, where Enoch received his first elm. This is not sleep technique in the modern productivity sense. This is the ancient practice of letting a holy image become a companion in the dark. The Ethiopian monk who first developed this practice understood something that we often forget. The sleeping mind is not empty. It is a field, and what you plant in it at the threshold matters. You do not need to understand the animal apocalypse completely. You do not need to have resolved every theological question it raises. You just need one image, one white bull, one flock gathered at the door, one scribe writing. I want to offer a Kerbit sequence now, a slow reading of 5 images from tonight's text, as a way of preparing your mind for the sleep transition. Breathe with me. Image 1. Adam, a white bull, walking across a field that has never been touched. The grass is long. The light is low. Everything is undarkened. Image 2. Enoch, a young man, running through a pre-dawn courtyard. He has seen the worst. He falls. His grandfather receives him and says, "Rise up and pray." Image 3. The scribe sitting at a desk in a high place, writing in a book that no one else can see. The page is endless. Every word is witnessed. Image 4. The predators, wolves, foxes, ravens, standing at the edge of the new house, and the darkness draining out of them, slowly, quietly, like something released until they are white. Image 5. You lying where you are lying, breathing the way you are breathing, carried by the same ancient care that carried every scattered sheep back to the house. Let those images slow your mind. We are almost at the threshold. One more moment of teaching, and then we rest. Zerah Haymanot, Ge'ez compound, seed of faith, or the seedling of faithfulness, a concept used in the Ethiopian Orthodox monastic tradition to describe the small, persistent acts of faithful stewardship that go largely unnoticed in human time, but are fully recorded in divine memory. The seed that faith plants in the dark and visible to all but the scribe and the one who sees the dark. The concept of Zerah Haymanot was developed as a theological response to the question of whether invisible faithfulness counts, whether the monk who copies the same verse for the 40th year, whether the widow who prays at 3 a.m., whether the parent who remains faithful through a long season of silence are doing anything that matters. The Ethiopian tradition's answer is unequivocal. Yes, the scribe writes it all. Research in developmental psychology and resilience studies now confirms what the Zerah Haymanot tradition intuited. Small, consistent acts of faithful stewardship, even when the outcome is invisible, produce what researchers call earned attachment and resilience scaffolding. The faith seed planted in invisible faithfulness produces its fruit on a timeline that does not match the planter's expectations. We have traveled a long way tonight. We began on the banks of the Blue Nile, a monastery carved into rock, a monk reading before dawn. We moved through the animal code: Adam the white bull, Cain the black bull, Abraham the lamb, Moses the illuminated sheep, the 70 shepherds who failed, the great white bull at the end. We passed through the Maccabean crisis, the Qumran caves, the Ge'ez manuscripts of Lake Tana, the Timkat waters of Gondar, the midnight liturgy still being performed in a church you have never visited, on behalf of a flock that includes you. And now, I want to bring all of that down to a single point. Not to summarize it, to apply it, because the animal apocalypse is not an academic text. It was not written for scholars. It was written for people like you, people who are trying to make sense of what has happened to them, people who are living inside a shepherd period that has exceeded its command, people who need to know that history has a shape, and the shape is moving towards something. Before we reach the sleep transition, I want to show you how a single verse from tonight's text speaks directly to whatever you are carrying right now, whatever season of life this is for you. The verse is 1 Enoch 89:76. And I saw that the Lord of the sheep came to them with wrath, and all who were with him had a sword in their hands. And all the sheep were afraid of them and fled before him. But the Lord of the sheep did not slay any of them. Read that carefully. The Lord comes in wrath. The sheep are afraid and flee, but the Lord does not slay any of them. He comes close enough that they are afraid. He does not destroy what he is afraid of losing. I have sat with people who were convinced, in the middle of a crushing season of life, that God was done with them, that the wrath moment had arrived, that they had exhausted the limit of divine patience. The animal apocalypse does not comfort this fear with denial. It comforts it with a different image. The wrath comes. The fear is real, but even then the Lord does not slay any of them. The fear of the moment does not determine the outcome of the moment. Whatever season you are in tonight, whether it feels like a wolf period, a failed shepherd period, a scattering, an exile, I want you to hear this. You have not been slain. You are still here. You pressed play tonight. You listened this far. The seed of faith is still planted. The scribe is still writing. And the season, however long it has lasted, is a shepherd period. It has an end. Every shepherd period has an end. The scribe records the end as precisely as the beginning. The practical application of the animal apocalypse. The practical application the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition developed over 17 centuries is not theological analysis. It is this. Keep copying, keep praying, keep planting the Zera Haymanot, the seed of faithfulness, even when the field is dark. The monk in the scriptorium did not know you would hear his work tonight. The Timkat priest does not know who will be changed by the blessed water this January. The monks at Debre Damo do not know whose name they are speaking when they pray for the remnant at 2 a.m. But they keep praying, they keep copying, they keep planting, because the scribe is watching, and the transformation is already happening in ways that are not yet visible to the eye that is still open, but are already written in the book that will be opened. Let that be the word you carry into sleep tonight. Not a theology, not an argument, a seed. The Zera Haymanot, the seed of faithfulness, already planted, already being watered, already in the truest sense, the animal apocalypse knows, already becoming white. Take one breath now, in, out. The walled garden is waiting. The fig tree is waiting. The warm stone is waiting. And the transformation has already begun. The garden wall is waiting. Let everything else go quiet. There is a garden, not large, walled on all four sides with old stone, the kind of stone that holds warmth long after the sun has gone. You find yourself standing just inside the gate. The gate is iron, old iron, the kind that does not lock, because everything that needed to come in has already come in. The evening is settling. The birds that were singing through the afternoon are moving toward their quieter songs now. Not silence, not yet, but the softer registers, the ones that belong to the end of the day. There is a fig tree near the center of the garden. It is old. The bark is rough and gray. The branches reach in every direction, patient, unhurried, like arms that have been extended for a long time and are no longer tired. Beneath the fig tree there is a stone bench, wide enough for 2 people, warm from the afternoon sun. You sit on the bench. The stone receives you. That is the only way to say it. It receives you, the warmth of it rising up through your back, through your shoulders, settling everything that was still moving. There is a lantern on the ground nearby. It has been lit. A small flame, not very bright, just enough. The kind of flame that says, someone was here before you, and they left the light on. In the corner of the garden, there is a well, the stone circle of it, gray and smooth, with a wooden cover resting lightly on top, the rope coiled beside it. The water inside the well is cold and still. You can hear it if you listen. Or perhaps you cannot hear it exactly, but you know it is there. Cold, still, deep, waiting. A bird lands in the fig tree above you. You cannot see it clearly in the evening light, but you can hear it. One note, then another, then a pause, then the same note again, as though it is practicing something, or remembering something, or simply content to say the same true thing, over and over, until night comes. The lantern flame bends slightly, not a wind, just the movement of the air, settling into evening. The flame rights itself, burns steady. You are not waiting for anything. That is the important thing. You are not here to think through a problem, or arrive at a conclusion, or prepare for tomorrow. You are here because the gate was open, and the bench was warm, and the lantern was lit, and that is enough. The fig tree drops one leaf. Slowly, it catches the last light, turns once, then settles into the grass at your feet. The bird in the branches goes quiet, and the garden receives the quiet the way the stone received you. Naturally, without effort, as though the quiet was what it had been for all along. Somewhere on the other side of the garden wall, the world is still doing what the world does. But in here, the wall holds. The stone holds. The lantern holds. The well holds its cold water. The fig tree holds its old arms open, and you are held inside all of it, the way a letter is held inside an envelope, sealed, safe, going somewhere. Let the animals of Enoch's dream rest now. Let the white bull stand quietly in his field. Let the scribe set down his pen. Let the 70 shepherds answer for what they did. That accounting is not yours to carry tonight. Let the predator stand at the edge of the new house, already becoming white. It is happening without your effort, without your watching. It is happening. The lantern grows softer, not going out, just softer, finding its resting level. The birds have gone quiet. The stone is still warm. Breathe once, slowly, in, out, and again. The wall holds. The gate is closed. The lantern burns, and you are here. And this is enough. Let your body become heavy. Let your thoughts become slow. Let the garden do what gardens do at night. Grow quiet. Grow dark. Grow still and wait for morning. There is no need to stay awake for this. The garden will be here when you return. The fig tree will still be here. The well will still be here. The warm stone will still be here. You can sleep now. Breathe, breathe. The lantern holds the night at a respectful distance, and you sleep inside the light. May the water that blessed Enoch's prayer, the water that parted for the sheep, the water that the priests blessed at Timcat before dawn, wash over whatever you carried in with you tonight. May the 70 shepherd periods that tested your ancestors be a reminder that every season of hardship has a supervisor, a record, and an end. May the great white bull of Enoch's last vision stand at the threshold of your dreaming, the restoration that is already coming, already becoming, already white. Sleep well, you. The scribe is still writing. The gate is still closed. The lantern is still burning. You are held. Amen. The opening of the second vision in 1 Enoch 85 begins not with sheep, but with stars. Before the animals appear, before Adam, before Cain, before the patriarchal lineage unfolds, Enoch sees stars falling from heaven. This is the language of the Watcher tradition. The same tradition described at length in 1 Enoch 6, 1:1, the Book of the Watchers, now filtered through the symbolic grammar of the animal apocalypse. In the earlier section of 1 Enoch, the Watchers are described as angelic beings who descended on Ardis, which is the summit of Mount Hermon, and swore an oath to take human wives. In the animal apocalypse, this same event is reframed as stellar descent. Stars fall from the sky, land among the cattle and the sheep, and begin to graze among them. The shift from angelic anthropomorphism to stellar symbolism is not arbitrary. It serves a specific function. It universalizes the Watcher fall. In the Book of the Watchers, the transgression is local. 200 angels, Mount Hermon, the daughters of men. In the animal apocalypse, the transgression is cosmic. Stars falling, the entire structure of heaven disrupted. The Ethiopian Orthodox theological tradition reads this distinction carefully. In the Ge'ez commentary tradition on this passage, the stars falling imagery is explicitly connected to Isaiah 14:12. How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. This is the verse that the Ethiopian theological tradition, following the Ge'ez translation of the Septuagint, calls the Hallel verse, the verse about the one who wanted to ascend above the stars of God. What the animal apocalypse proposes is that this is not an isolated event. It is a pattern. Stars fall. They enter the world. They corrupt what they touch, and the record is kept. The detail that the stars began to graze among the cattle, that they took on animal form and entered the animal community, is theologically significant in the Ethiopian reading. It suggests that transgression is not always visible from the outside. The fallen stars look like the other animals. They eat with them, they move among them, until the corruption becomes apparent in the offspring. This is the theological problem of spiritual deception. The wolf that looks like a sheep, that the animal apocalypse takes seriously, and that the Ethiopian Orthodox monastic tradition built extensive discernment practices around. The Fikare Iesus, Love of Jesus, the Ethiopian monastic manual, contains an extended section on recognizing the stars that have not fallen. Language drawn directly from the animal apocalypse's distinction between stars that remained in heaven and stars that descended. The spiritual director in this tradition is understood as someone who can read the difference, who can see in the behavior of a disciple over time whether the light they carry is original or borrowed. This is not cynicism. It is simply the ancient tradition's awareness that spiritual community is also a site of spiritual risk, and that the appropriate response is not suspicion, but discernment. Mahalalel taught Enoch this. Enoch dreamed it. The Debteras encoded it in the commentaries, and the commentaries found their way into the monastic manuals. The chain of transmission is unbroken. The number 70 is not accidental in the animal apocalypse. It is, in fact, one of the most precisely loaded numbers in the entire biblical tradition. And understanding why the author chose 70 shepherds rather than 60 or 80 or 100 unlocks a crucial layer of the text's meaning. Let us count the 70s. In Genesis 46-27, Jacob descends into Egypt with 70 souls. In Exodus 24-1, Moses is commanded to bring 70 elders up the mountain with him. In Numbers 11:16, God instructs Moses to gather 70 elders before the tent of meeting. In the Table of Nations, Genesis 10, the traditional count of nations produced by Noah's descendants is 70. In Luke 10-1, Jesus sends out 70 or 72, in some manuscripts, disciples. In the Septuagint tradition, 70 or 72 scholars translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek. 70, in the biblical imagination, is the number of completeness extended into the world, the fullness of something applied to the whole human family. When the animal apocalypse assigns 70 angelic shepherds to oversee the post-exilic history of Israel, It is making a claim of cosmic proportionality. The same fullness that descended with Jacob into Egypt, the same fullness that stood with Moses on the mountain, is now assigned in diminished, failing form to the supervision of the scattered flock. The 70 is the promise reversed. 70 went down into Egypt in hope. 70 angelic shepherds oversaw the exile in failure. But the same number, the same promise, frames both ends of the story. The Ethiopian Orthodox numerical theology called Mismar, the counting, reckoning, takes this seriously. In the Ethiopian monastic tradition, the number 70 is associated with the full measure of human history before the eschatological intervention. The monks at Lalibela and Debre Libanos have counted the shepherd periods and associated them with specific historical eras, in a tradition that reaches back to the 13th century scholar Iesus Moa. This is not numerology. It is theological numerics, the use of precise biblical numbers to claim that history has a shape and that the shape is intentional. The implication is pastoral as much as historical. If history has a shape, if the numbers are deliberate, then the suffering of the flock in any given era is not a sign that the divine plan has collapsed. It is a sign that a specific shepherd period is running its course. And all shepherd periods end. Every one of the 70 has an end. The scribe records the end as precisely as the beginning. The animal apocalypse and the book of Jubilees are sister texts. Both were written within approximately the same 50-year window, roughly 150 BCE. Both were found in multiple copies at Qumran, indicating broad use in the same communities. Both were preserved fully only in the Ethiopian canon. Both address the same theological questions. Why does history go wrong? What is the angelic role in human history? What is the relationship between the nations and the people of God? But they address these questions in distinctly different registers. Jubilees is meticulous, calendrical, legalistic. It rewrites Genesis and early Exodus in a framework of precise weeks of years, insisting that God's covenant with Israel was established on a specific calendar that the nations have disregarded. The animal apocalypse is visionary, symbolic, apocalyptic. It does not argue. It shows. It presents history as a dream and lets the dream speak. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition treats both texts as canonical and reads them as complementary, not competing. Jubilees gives the skeleton of sacred history, the precise dates, the covenantal structure. The animal apocalypse gives the soul of sacred history, the meaning, the grief, the hope. A church that has both texts available does not have to choose between the ordered and the visionary, between the law and the prophecy, between the letter and the spirit. It holds both. The theological richness of the Ethiopian canon, the reason it feels different, deeper, more layered than the canon of 39 books, is partly because it has refused to let these two registers separate. The Western canon, after the Council of Carthage, lost Jubilees and one Enoch, and with them it lost the ability to read Genesis as the Qumran community read it, as a contested, living, dangerous document, whose deepest meaning required both meticulous, legal precision and apocalyptic, visionary, daring. The Ethiopian Church still reads Genesis that way, because it still has both books. Let us return to Mahalalel. He appears briefly only in the opening of the first vision, chapters 83-84. He receives Enoch's dream. He gives Enoch a command: rise up and pray. And then he largely disappears from the narrative. But his role in the theological structure of the Book of Dream Visions is more significant than its brevity suggests. Mahalalel is the fifth patriarch in the Sethite lineage. Adam Sith, Enoch, Kenan, Mahalalel. He is the grandfather of Jared, who is the father of Enoch. In the Genesis chronology, he lives 895 years. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition gives particular attention to the lineage of transmission, the chain of wisdom passed from father to son, grandfather to grandson, and treats Mahalalel's role in the animal apocalypse as a paradigm of what healthy, intergenerational spiritual relationship looks like. Mahalalel does not tell Enoch to ignore the dream. He does not rationalize it. He does not try to make the dream mean something less frightening than it is. He says, "This is real, now pray." In the Ge'ez commentary tradition, Mahalalel is described as a Gebre Chemamat, a person of receiving, someone who has the capacity to receive another person's overwhelming experience without being destroyed by it and without reducing it to something manageable. This is, in contemporary therapeutic language, what we call holding capacity, the ability to be a container for another person's distress. The Ethiopian tradition located this capacity not in professional training, but in spiritual maturity rooted in lived practice, specifically in the practice of intercessory prayer. Mahalalel can receive Enoch's dream because Mahalalel has been praying for the world. For the better part of 9 centuries, he has already seen the worst in prayer. The dream Enoch brings does not break him. He has already carried it in a different form for longer than Enoch has been alive. This is one of the most practical pastoral insights in the entire Enoch corpus. The ones who can receive us most fully are often the ones who have been carrying the same weight longest. Not the most articulate, not the most theologically sophisticated, the ones who have prayed long enough that the worst no longer destroys their capacity to remain present. Find those people, and if you are those people for someone in your life, know that what you have endured has given you something that cannot be taught, the capacity to receive. We have spent considerable time on the ending of the animal apocalypse, the transformation of the predators, the great white bull, the rejoicing of the Lord. But I want to revisit this ending once more with a specific theological question. When does the transformation happen? The answer the animal apocalypse gives is not what most people expect. Most apocalyptic literature places the transformation firmly at the end, after the judgment, after the final battle, after the last shepherd has given his account. The transformation is future. It is contingent on completion. The animal apocalypse does not quite say this. In 1 Enoch 90 to 28:38, the sequence is 1. The old house is folded up. 2. The new house comes down. 3. The Lord enters. 4. All the sheep are gathered inside. 5. The animals outside begin to change. 6. They become white. 7. The great white bull is born. Notice step 5 and 6. The transformation of the predators happens while the sheep are already inside the new house. The transformation of the enemies does not require anyone's action. It simply happens, as though the proximity of the new house, the nearness of the restored creation, is itself transformative, as though holiness in sufficient concentration bleaches everything near it. This is a profound theological claim. It says, transformation is not an act of violence. It is an act of proximity. The enemies become white, not because they are defeated, but because they are included in the neighborhood of the new creation. The Ethiopian Orthodox theological term for this is tehadiso, renewal, renovation, the making new of what was old. It is the same word used in the great anaphora of the Ethiopian liturgy, when the priest prays over the bread and wine. Renew in us, O Lord, the spirit of holiness, not create from nothing. Renew, What was once white, darkened, can be whitened again. The animal apocalypse closes with this conviction. And it is not naive optimism. It is the theological claim of a community that has watched the darkening happen for centuries and has not stopped believing in the original white. The Messiah comes last, after the transformation, to confirm what has already happened, to name what has already become real. This is the final gift of the animal apocalypse to your sleep tonight. The restoration is not coming. It is already happening. In you, around you, in the people who have hurt you, in the systems that have failed you. The darkness is not their last word. The white is older than the dark, and the white is where everything is going. Rest in that. We began tonight on the banks of the Blue Nile, the Abay River, in the gorge country of Ethiopia. Let me tell you why this geography matters. The Blue Nile Gorge is one of the most geographically isolated landscapes on Earth. The canyon descends more than 1,500 meters in some places, nearly a mile of vertical drop. The monasteries and churches built into the walls of this canyon were chosen precisely because they were inaccessible. To reach some of them, you need ropes. To reach others, you need to descend stone staircases cut into the cliff face by monks who had no power tools. To reach still others, you need to wait for a boat that crosses the canyon's floor at specific hours. This is where the manuscripts survived, not by accident, by choice. The monks chose impossible geography because impossible geography was the best preservative known to the ancient world. No army has ever successfully cleared the Blue Nile Gorge monastery network. The Ottoman expansion that swept across North Africa stopped at the gorge. The Italian colonial period, the most complete surviving Ge'ez manuscript tradition, is from the very monasteries the Italian army never reached. This is the theology of the animal apocalypse, lived out in stone and rope and altitude. Preservation through hiddenness, survival through inaccessibility. The flock gathered into a place the wolves cannot follow. The animal apocalypse's vision of the new house, the house that comes down from heaven, where the sheep are finally safe, finds its earthly parallel in these canyon monasteries. Not the eternal house, not the final house, but a sign of it, a model of it. A place where the scribe kept writing, because the walls held, and in those monasteries, through centuries of isolation and preservation, the text of the animal apocalypse survived. The text that says, "The scattered flock will be gathered, the predators will become white, the Lord will enter the new house, and the Lord will smile at that one." The geography of survival and the theology of survival turned out to be the same thing. You cannot get the dream unless you protect the dream. You cannot keep the vision unless you build walls around it. Not walls of exclusion, walls of preservation. Walls that say, not yet, not until it is safe to come out, not until the wolves have become white. Rest, you. The walls are holding. The dream is intact. The monks are still praying in the canyon, and the text has found its way to you. The image of the angelic scribe in the animal apocalypse is one that deserves sustained attention, because it carries a theological weight that the text itself only partially unpacks. Let us unpack it further. The scribe is introduced in 1 Enoch 89 to 61-64, "And I saw till that shepherd came to them, and those sheep were all given over to him. And he began to slay those sheep, and they cried out, and their cries went up to heaven. And I called one of those 4 who had come to me, and I said to him, Why does that shepherd slay and destroy more of those sheep than he was commanded?" And he answered me and said, "This is also written down before the Lord, and he can see it. The structure is crucial. Enoch witnesses the excess of harm. Enoch cries out. The angel explains, "It is written down." The scribe is the answer to the cry. Not a comforter, not an avenger, not a rescuer. A witness who records. In the Ethiopian Orthodox theological tradition, this is understood as one of the most radical claims in the entire Enoch corpus. God's answer to unexplained suffering is not immediate explanation. It is permanent witness. The cry is heard, the excess is recorded, and the record sealed, protected, will be opened. The theology of witness, the belief that suffering is seen, recorded, and will be acknowledged, is woven into the fabric of Ethiopian Christian spirituality in ways that go beyond theological proposition. It shapes the architecture of worship. The Ethiopian church building is divided into three parts. The outer court, the Quene Mahelet, where singing and prayer occur. The middle court, the Quedist, where communion is received, and the innermost sanctuary, the Maktas, where the tablet rests, and only the tabo can enter the Maktas. The tabo is the witness, the presence of God, the permanent record, and the liturgy performed around and toward the Maktas is the community's enactment of the truth that the scribe is still writing. The witness is still present. The record is still being kept. In the 13th century, the great Ethiopian ruler and Saint Lalibela built 11 rock-hewn churches in the town that now bears his name. The most famous of these is Beta Georgis Street, George's Church, a perfect cross cut straight down into the living rock, surrounded on all sides by a trench. There is no easy entry. You have to descend into the trench, walk along the stone floor, enter through a low door. It is not accident that this structure mirrors the theology of the Maktas. The presence is at the center. An approach requires descent, requires humility, requires going down before you can go in. The scribe's record is not for the powerful. It is for the ones who came down, the ones who descended into the trench, the ones who entered through the low door. The animal apocalypse was written for those people, and tonight it has found some of them. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, the icon is not a decoration. It is a theological statement. Icons in the Ethiopian tradition, called temsel in Ge'ez, are understood as windows. Not the thing they depict, but a transparent opening toward the thing they depict. You do not pray to the icon. You pray through it. The icon is the frame through which the invisible becomes approachable. The most common icon in Ethiopian Orthodox churches is the depiction of Mary with the Christ child, the Kidan Meret, Covenant of Mercy tradition, in which Mary's large dark eyes look not at the viewer, but slightly above and beyond the viewer, as though she is already seeing what the viewer cannot yet see. But there is a second icon tradition in Ethiopian churches that most Western visitors never notice. The icon of the heavenly banquet, the eschatological feast where all the nations are gathered, represented by animals seated at a table, wolves beside sheep, eagles beside doves, lions beside lambs. This is the animal apocalypse, iconographically rendered. The transformation already shown in image form, placed on the walls of the church, surrounded by incense smoke and the sound of the mazmur, the psalms sung antiphonally before every liturgy. The community that worships in these churches is not taught the animal apocalypse as a theology course. They absorb it through their eyes, their ears, their bodies, through the images on the walls, the structure of the space, the pattern of the liturgy. This is catechesis through aesthetics, theology transmitted through beauty. And the beauty says, the wolves are already at the table, the eagles are already beside the doves. This is not wishful thinking. This is a window into what is actually true. What the scribe has already written, what the record already shows, what the Lord of the Sheep already sees from the other side of the wall. When you lie down tonight, you are lying in the same world that those icons describe. Not a world where the wolves have been defeated and the eagles have been destroyed. A world where the wolves and eagles have been transformed, are being transformed, have already, in the truest possible sense, begun to become white. You do not need to fix this world. You do not need to resolve its contradictions before you sleep. You just need to let the icon do what icons do. Open a window into what is already true, and rest in what you see through the window. There is something important to say about the Maccabean revolt that the animal apocalypse handles with more nuance than most Christian readers expect. The great horn that grows on the sheep, the Maccabean resistance, wins. It actually wins. In 164 BCE, Judas Maccabeus and his brothers rededicated the Jerusalem temple. They restored the seven-branched menorah. They reinstituted the Torah reading. They established the Feast of Hanukkah to commemorate the victory. And then, within a generation, the dynasty founded by the Maccabees, the Hasmoneans, became as corrupt as the kings they had replaced. By 63 BCE, two Hasmonean brothers, Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II, were so bitterly at war over the high priesthood that they invited the Roman general Pompey into Jerusalem to arbitrate. Pompey entered the city, and the Roman occupation began and continued for the next 400 years. The Maccabean victory was real. The Maccabean victory was also temporary, and the animal apocalypse, written during the height of that victory, already knew this. The vision does not end with the Maccabean victory. It passes through it. The great horn pushes back the wolves for a season, and then the vision moves toward the final transformation. This is the animal apocalypse theology of partial victories. They are real. They matter. They are worth the blood they cost. But they are not the end. They are signs of the end. Previews. Foretastes. Every time a community resists oppression, every time a temple is rededicated, every time a sacred text is recovered and read aloud, that is a partial victory. And partial victories are not less than full victories. They are how full victories come. The great white bull does not appear ex nihilo. He appears after a long chain of great horns, each one partial, each one contributing, each one written into the scribe's record. If you have achieved something partial, a partial reconciliation, a partial healing, a partial recovery of something that was taken from you, do not dismiss it because it is not the full restoration. The animal apocalypse honors partial victories. It includes them in the record. The great horn is in the book. Your partial victory is in the book, and the full restoration will acknowledge each partial contribution. When the record is finally opened, rest in that, you. We have spent this night with the animal apocalypse, the great symbolic drama of sheep and shepherds and wolves. And before we close, I want to draw three threads together that have been running through the entire tradition we have explored. Thread 1. The scapegoat. In the Yom Kippur ritual described in Leviticus 16, 2 goats are brought to the priest. One is sacrificed, one is released. The released goat, the scapegoat, carries the sins of the community into the wilderness. In the animal apocalypse, Azazel, connected to the scapegoat tradition, is bound and cast into the desert at Dudael. His binding is a form of scapegoating, the concentrated evil removed from the community, carried away to a place outside. Thread 2. The shepherd. Throughout the animal apocalypse, the Lord of the Sheep watches from a height. He calls, he leads, he grieves. He does not abandon the flock. even when the flock scatters. He weeps when the shepherds fail. This is the shepherd of Psalm 23. The Lord as shepherd, applied to the entire sweep of human history. Not a single psalm, not a single night of protection. Every era, every shepherd period, every scattering and gathering. Thread 3, the Lamb. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchal line are lambs and sheep. They are vulnerable. They are domestic. They are under the shepherd's care. And in the final vision, the Messiah is born from the flock, not from outside it, as a white bull who restores the original Adamic dignity. But on the way to the great white bull, the flock has to endure the wolf attacks, the 70 shepherd failures, the darkness of the exile. The lamb who survives the darkness becomes the bull who announces the dawn. These 3 threads, scapegoat, shepherd, lamb, converge in the New Testament's presentation of Jesus, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, the Good Shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep, the Son of Man who comes to judge the nations. The animal apocalypse did not predict Jesus, but it assembled the symbolic vocabulary from which the first followers of Jesus drew when they tried to explain who he was and what he had done. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church understands this. It reads 1 Enoch and the Gospels together, not because one predicts the other, but because both are drawing from the same deep well of Jewish prophetic and visionary language. And tonight, you have been drinking from that well. The scapegoat, the shepherd, the lamb, the great white bull, all of them saying the same thing in different voices. The darkness has a record. The record will be opened. The original white will return. Sleep well. To read the animal apocalypse as its first audience read it, we have to reconstruct what they already knew. The background knowledge that made the animal code legible, that made the number 70 resonate, that made the image of the Lord weeping produce not confusion but recognition. The first audience of the animal apocalypse lived in the 2nd century BCE. They were Jewish. They were observant. They had memorized the Torah Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, not from a printed book, but from years of oral recitation and communal reading. They knew every name in the genealogies. They knew every nation in the Table of Nations. They knew that 70 sons of Jacob went down to Egypt. They knew that 70 elders stood with Moses on the mountain. When the animal apocalypse opened with white bulls and black bulls, and then transitioned to stars falling, and then to sheep, the original audience did not need a commentary. They were the commentary. They also knew their post-exilic situation viscerally. By the 2nd century BCE, the Jewish community had already been through the Babylonian exile, 597, 538 BCE, the return under Cyrus the Great, the reconstruction of the temple under Zerubbabel, the Greek conquest under Alexander, 332 BCE, the division of Alexander's empire and the resulting Ptolemaic and Seleucid contests over Palestine, and finally, the Seleucid king Antiochus III's conquest of Jerusalem in 198 BCE. That is, 400 years of foreign domination, interrupted only briefly by the return from exile. Since the end of the Davidic monarchy, for this community the question was not academic. It was existential. Why is this happening? Who is responsible? Where is God in this? Will it ever end? The animal apocalypse answered these questions not with philosophy, but with vision. God is watching. The supervisors are recorded. The excess of harm is written down. History has a shape. The shape ends with transformation, and for a community that had memorized every syllable of the Psalms that asked God, how long? How long? How long? The answer that the animal apocalypse offered was not trivially optimistic. It was earned. The text took the full darkness of the exile seriously. It did not minimize the failures of the shepherds. It did not promise a quick resolution. It said 70 periods, each one supervised, each one recorded, and then transformation. For the audience that first heard this text, that was the most honest hope they had ever been offered. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has lived inside this hope for 17 centuries. Not because the Church is naive about history. Ethiopian history has included invasion, occupation, famine, civil war, the attempted erasure of cultural and religious identity. But through all of it, the monks kept copying, the Debteras kept teaching, the tabots kept being carried in procession, the Timcat water kept being blessed, because the animal apocalypse told them, every shepherd period ends, the scribe is still writing, the transformation is already beginning. We have spent this entire night with the content of Enoch's visions, but I want to pause and consider the figure of Enoch himself, who he was, what his life represents, and why his particular biography made him the ideal carrier of these visions. The biblical account of Enoch is startlingly brief. Genesis 5:21, 24. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more, because God took him. That's it. That is the entire Genesis account of Enoch. 3 verses, 2 observations. He walked with God. He was taken by God. But in the Enoch tradition, in the 5 books of Enoch, the Book of the Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Astronomical Book, the Book of Dream Visions, and the Epistle of Enoch, the brief biographical note of Genesis 5 unfolds into one of the richest and most theologically complex figures in all of Jewish literature. Enoch is simultaneously a dreamer who receives cosmic visions, an intercessor who prays for both humanity and the fallen angels, a scribe who writes down what he has seen, a traveler who is carried through the heavens by angelic guides, and a grandfather who teaches his son and grandson. The Ge'ez tradition adds one more dimension. Enoch as the first copyist, the one who received the divine wisdom and preserved it in writing, before the flood destroyed the world. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, Enoch occupies a theological position, analogous to but distinct from Moses. Moses received the Torah on Mount Sinai. Enoch received the cosmic wisdom in the heavens. Moses received the law for the organized community. Enoch received the vision for the suffering individual. Moses wrote on stone. Enoch dreamed on cloth and grass, and in the open air. Both received real things. Both preserved what they received. Both were taken. Moses died on Mount Nebo, buried by God, unseen to this day. Enoch did not die at all. He walked, and then he was not, and then God had him. The Ethiopian Ge'ez commentary tradition describes Enoch's translation, his being taken by God without dying, as the first resurrection preview, the first hint in human history that the transformation the animal apocalypse describes is not merely cosmic and political, but personal. If Enoch could be transformed, if a human being could walk so closely with God that the boundary between mortal and immortal became permeable, then the transformation the vision describes for the entire world is not a cold theological claim about history. It is a warm, personal promise about what is possible for the person who walks faithfully. Walk faithfully, then be not, because God has you. That is Enoch's biography in 6 words, and it is, in the deepest reading of the animal apocalypse, the biography, the vision hopes you will recognize as your own. The image of the angelic scribe recording history is not unique to the animal apocalypse. It appears across the entire tradition of ancient Jewish and early Christian literature in ways that suggest it was not a metaphor for the original audience. It was a cosmological fact. Let us trace the tradition. In Exodus 32 to 32:33, after the golden calf incident, Moses says to God, "If you will not forgive their sin, blot me out of the book you have written." And God replies, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. There is a divine book. Names can be in it. Names can be removed from it. The book is real." In Daniel 7:10, the Ancient of Days takes his seat, and the judgment begins. The court was seated, and the books were opened. Books, plural, a whole library of records. In Malachi 3:16, then those who feared the Lord talked with each other, and the Lord listened and heard. A scroll of remembrance was written in his presence, concerning those who feared the Lord and honored his name. A scroll of remembrance for the ones who talked about God while others were silent, their conversations written down. In Revelation 20:12, and I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. The books again, the judgment based on what was recorded. The animal apocalypse sits in the center of this tradition and makes its most precise contribution. The books that are opened at judgment specifically record the gap between what was commanded and what was actually done. Not just the catalog of sins, not just the list of names, but the precise differential, the commanded harm versus the actual harm. For every shepherd who was given a trust, this is, theologically, the most nuanced form of divine bookkeeping in all of ancient literature. It says the question at judgment is not simply, "What did you do?" The question is, what were you given responsibility for, and how faithfully did you exercise that responsibility? The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition calls this concept Zera Haymanot, the seed of faithfulness, the idea that the divine accounting is not based on achievement, but on the faithfulness of stewardship. The shepherd who was given 10 sheep and protected 7 is more fully accountable than the shepherd who was given 100 and lost 60. The measure is always, what were you given and what did you do with it? This is extraordinarily liberating and extraordinarily demanding. At the same time, it means no one is measured against anyone else. The grieving mother is not measured against the saint. The exhausted worker is not measured against the contemplative. The one who had nothing to give but gave it anyway is not compared with the one who had everything. Everyone is measured against their own commanded trust. Everyone's scribe records the differential between the command they received and the performance they gave. And the mercy in the animal apocalypse is this: the Lord of the sheep weeps over the 70 shepherds' failures. He weeps. He does not gloat. He does not say, "I told you so." He weeps because the scribe's record is not kept to condemn. It is kept because something happened that mattered. Because the sheep were real. Because the harm was real. And the record is the only thing that says, all of this was real, and it was witnessed, and it will be answered. We have been together for some hours now. The main teaching has passed. The garden narration has come and gone, and you are somewhere between wakefulness and sleep, in the hypnagogic threshold, the place where Enoch first received his elm. Let me say one final thing about sleep itself, about what the Ethiopian tradition believes is happening in the hours of unconsciousness that most of the modern world treats as simple biological rest. In the Ethiopian Orthodox theological anthropology, the human being is understood as a composite of three elements: the body, yasad, the soul, nefs, and the spirit, menfes. These three are not identical to the Pauline body-soul-spirit distinction, though they rhyme with it. In the Ethiopian reading, sleep is not the suspension of the self. It is the partial separation of the nefs from its daily preoccupations, the soul loosening its grip on the world of objects and obligations, while the menfes, the spirit, becomes more available to its deeper orientation. The Book of Dream Visions, the very text we have been studying tonight, begins with Enoch asleep. It is in the sleep state that the cosmic vision comes. It is at the hypnagogic threshold that the angel guides arrive. It is in the partial separation of the nefs that the menfes becomes receptive enough to receive what the waking mind cannot hold. This is not incidental. It is theological. Sleep, in the Ethiopian tradition, is not the absence of the sacred. It is one of the primary sites of the sacred. The great Ethiopian hymnist Yared, who lived in the 6th century CE, wrote in the Degwa, the Ethiopian hymnary that bears his name, "In the quiet of the night, the soul that is rested hears what the busy soul misses at noon." This is not poetry for poetry's sake. It is a theological claim. The night hours, the sleep hours, are hours when the divine communication that the waking mind filters out can pass through, not always as dream, sometimes as simply a different quality of rest, a rest that is not merely physical, a rest that restores the menfes to its original orientation, the way Timkat restores the baptismal whiteness. When the monks at Debre Damo rise at 2 a.m. to pray, they are rising from precisely this state, the deep hours of the night, when the nefs has released its grip on the world's complications, and the menfes is most awake. Their prayer at 2 a.m. is not an interruption of their sleep. It is the fulfillment of it. They have slept until the soul was ready, and then they rose. You do not need to rise at 2 a.m. tonight, but I want you to know that the sleep you are entering, the hours ahead of you, are not empty. They are the hours the Ethiopian tradition calls Leilit Kedes, the holy night, the hours when something that cannot be rushed has the space to work. Let it work. Rest your jasad, your body. Release your nefs, your soul, from today's complications, and let your menfes, your spirit, find its orientation again, in the silence that knows where it is going. The animal apocalypse was composed in the holy night. Enoch received it in the holy night. The monks of the Blue Nile Gorge copied it through the holy night. And tonight, on the edge of your own holy night, you have heard it. Sleep well. The scribe is writing. The Lord is watching. The walls are holding. The transformation is already beginning. And in the morning, when the light returns, you will be, by however small a measure, more white than you were when you lay down. That is the animal apocalypse final word. And it is enough. The animal apocalypse does not float in timeless mystical space. It is embedded in a very specific understanding of how time works, an understanding that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church inherited directly from the Second Temple tradition that produced the text. In the Book of Dream Visions, the 70 shepherd periods are not vague spans of some time. They are precise allocations. Each shepherd is given a specific number of sheep to oversee. and a specific time in which to do so. This precision is not incidental. It reflects the entire Second Temple Jewish understanding that time itself is sacred structure, that the cosmos operates on a divinely ordered calendar, and that history's unfolding follows that calendar, whether or not human beings are aware of it. The Book of Jubilees, the sister text we discussed earlier, makes this most explicit. It rewrites Genesis in units of Jubilees periods of 49 years, and insists that every major covenant event in sacred history falls on a precise Jubilee year or Sabbath year mark. The creation of Adam, year 1, day 1. The fall, also year 1, but later. The flood, a specific year in a specific Jubilee. This is not primitive numerology. It is a claim about the nature of God's relationship to time. God is not improvising. History is not reactive. Every event fits within a structure that was established before the first day. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church inherited this theology of sacred time through its full canon, including both Jubilees and 1 Enoch, and developed it into a liturgical calendar of extraordinary sophistication. The Ethiopian calendar has 13 months, 12 months of 30 days each, and 1 short month, Pagume, of 5 days or 6 in a leap year. This calendar is not the Gregorian calendar and not the Julian calendar. It is the ancient Alexandrian calendar, refined through centuries of Ethiopian use, anchored in the theological conviction that the structure of the year reflects the structure of salvation history. The great feasts of the Ethiopian year fall on dates that carry precise theological significance. Timkat on Tir 1 January 19. The Feast of the Nativity on Tassas 2, 9 January 7. The Feast of the Cross, Meskel, on Meskerem 2, 7 September or October. The Feast of Enoch, Ye Enoch, Beel, yes. Enoch has his own feast day, on Scene 1 to approximately June 1920. The fact that Enoch has a feast day in the Ethiopian Orthodox calendar is itself a statement about canonical status. Feast days are not given to marginal figures. Feast days are given to people whose lives are considered part of the sacred history that the Church enacts and reenacts in the annual cycle. When Pastor Michael reads you the animal apocalypse on a night like this, when you fall asleep to the image of the white bull and the walled garden, you are, whether you know it or not, entering the same sacred time structure that the Ethiopian monks and Debteras have been inhabiting for 17 centuries. The 70 shepherd periods are still being counted. The scribe is still writing. The feast days still come around. The Timkat water is still blessed each January. And the animal apocalypse is still being heard on mountaintops and in monastery cells, and in the ears of tired people who press play at night, because they need to know that history has a shape, and the shape is not chaos. There is a passage in 1 Enoch 13:14, not in the animal apocalypse proper, but in the Book of the Watchers, the earlier section of the text, that illuminates the animal apocalypse in a way that most readings miss. Enoch is asked by the fallen Watchers to write a petition on their behalf and carry it to God. Not a testimony against them, a petition for them. They are asking for mercy. They cannot approach God themselves. They send a human being to carry their appeal. Enoch writes the petition. He sits by the waters of Dan, at the springs, which are southwest of Hermon, and reads it aloud. And then he falls asleep. And in the sleep, in the helm, the vision comes, and God shows him the heavenly throne room. And God says to Enoch, "Go and say to the Watchers, you should petition on behalf of men, not men on behalf of you." The petition is denied. But the structure of the encounter is extraordinary. Enoch, a mortal, a creature, a sheep in the language of the animal apocalypse, is the one who goes before the divine throne on behalf of fallen angels. A sheep praying for the stars that fell. This is one of the most theologically provocative images in all of ancient Judaism, and the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition does not shy away from it. In the Ge'ez commentary on this passage, the Debteras noted that Enoch's intercession for the fallen watchers demonstrates a principle that runs through the entire Enochic tradition. The intercessor does not choose who is worthy of intercession. The intercessor intercedes for whoever asks, even if the petition is denied. Even if the outcome is not what the asker hoped, the act of carrying the prayer to the throne, of standing between the fallen and the holy, is itself a righteous act. This is why the Ethiopian Church's theology of intercession is so expansive. Mary intercedes for humanity before Christ. The saints intercede for the living pray for the dead, and Enoch, in this earlier passage, even prays for the angels. No one is outside the reach of intercession. No situation is too far fallen to be carried to the throne. The petition may be denied. The outcome may not change, but the intercession is always righteous. The prayer is always a righteous act. The prayer is always worth making. And this is, perhaps, the final pastoral gift of the entire book of dream visions, the entire animal apocalypse to you on this night. Whatever you have been carrying, whatever has felt too fallen to bring before God, whatever you have told yourself was too broken, too ruined, too far from the white to be worth praying for, bring it. Write the petition, go to the water, read it aloud, and then fall asleep. The vision will come in the sleeping, and what the vision shows you will be truer than what your waking mind has managed so far. That is what the helm is for. Debre Libanos, the monastery of Lebanon, is one of the oldest and most important monastic communities in Ethiopian Christianity, founded in the 13th century by the great saint Tekle Haymanot, whose name means plant of faith. Debre Libanos became the center of a monastic reform movement that swept through Ethiopian Christianity and established the pattern of scriptural preservation that kept one Enoch and the animal apocalypse alive through the turbulent centuries. Tekle Haymanot himself is depicted in Ethiopian icons with 3 pairs of wings, borrowed symbolically from the seraphim of Isaiah 6, and 1 leg, because the legend says he stood in prayer so long that 1 leg withered and fell off, but he kept standing on 1 leg in prayer until God called him home. The monastery he founded at Debre Libanos became, in the 14th and 15th centuries, the site of one of the most important manuscript copying traditions in Africa. Hundreds of monk scholars, trained in Ge'ez, in liturgy, in the Andemta commentary tradition, produced copies of the Ethiopian canon, including the full text of 1 Enoch, in a scriptorium that operated continuously for 2 centuries. These manuscripts were distributed to churches throughout Ethiopia, to the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, to the island monasteries of Lake Tana, to the highland church communities of Gojam and Wello. Through this distribution network, the animal apocalypse reached every corner of Ethiopian Christianity, at precisely the moment when the Western Christian world had completely forgotten it existed. The Ethiopian word for this kind of community transmission is Amba Haymanot, the church mountain. The idea that the community of faith is itself a geographic feature, high enough to see far, stable enough to be a landmark, accessible to those who will make the climb. The animal apocalypse survived because communities like Debre Libanos chose to be Amba Haymanot. They chose to be high enough to preserve. stable enough to transmit, accessible to those who would climb. You are one of the ones who climb tonight. Not physically, not with ropes or stairs cut into rock, but with your attention, your willingness to listen, your openness to hearing something ancient say something new. That is its own kind of climbing, and the monastery welcomes you. The scriptorium has been open since the 13th century. The text is ready. The Deb Terra is waiting. Sit down. Let the Ge'ez settle into you. Let the white bull walk across the field. Let the scribe keep writing. You belong here. One of the most beautiful resonances in the entire biblical tradition is the echo between the final vision of the animal apocalypse, 1 Enoch 90, and the great peaceable kingdom passage of Isaiah 11. Isaiah 11 to 6, 9. The wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. And 1 Enoch 90:33. And I saw in the vision till those sheep were all scattered, and the wolves began to flee before them, and all the beasts of the field, and all the birds of the sky fled and were destroyed in that place, and there was peace among all of them after this. And then 1 Enoch 90:38, and all of them were white, and their wool was abundant and clean. The resonance is not coincidental. Both Isaiah and the animal apocalypse are drawing on the same deep grammar of the Hebrew prophetic imagination, the vision of a world where predation is over, where the original relationship of creation, the white of the beginning, has been restored. Isaiah uses the wolf and the lamb. The animal apocalypse uses the same animal vocabulary, but places it within an explicit historical narrative, showing the long journey from white bull to scattered flock to final transformation that Isaiah's prophecy assumes but does not describe. Together, the two texts form a complete picture. Isaiah shows you what the destination looks like. The animal apocalypse shows you how history moves toward it. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition reads Isaiah 11 in the same liturgical context as the Enochic eschatological passages, particularly during the Advent season, Soma Advent, the Ethiopian Advent fast, where the theme of the coming of the white bull is interwoven with the coming of the Christ child. In the Ethiopian Church, the Advent readings move from Isaiah's peaceable kingdom to the Enochic vision of transformation, to the nativity of Christ. 3 stations of the same journey, 3 views of the same mountain, 3 ways of saying, the world is going somewhere. The predators are becoming white, and the child who leads them is already born. Lie down in that world tonight, the one Isaiah saw, the one Enoch dreamed, the one the monks of Debre Libanos copied into permanence in their mountain scriptorium. The wolf lies down with the lamb. The great white bull stands at the end of the long road, and the knowledge of the Lord covers the earth as the waters cover the sea. And you are covered, and you are known, and you are by the most ancient standard of the tradition, white. In the Enochic tradition, there are 2 distinct models of how angels fail. The first model is the Watcher's model, transgression through desire. Angels who descended because they wanted something, the beauty of human women, and who traded their original station for immediate gratification. Their failure is dramatic, visible, sudden, stars falling, giants born, chaos spreading through the world. The second model is the shepherd model, transgression through negligence and excess. Angels who were given a task protect the flock, supervise the period, and who gradually, almost imperceptibly, allowed more harm than they were commanded to allow. The difference is significant. The Watcher failure is spectacular and obvious. Anyone can see it. The sky is full of fallen stars. The daughters of men are weeping. The giants are eating the people. The shepherd failure is quiet. It accumulates. It shows up only in the record, in the gap between the command and the performance. The sheep don't necessarily notice it at first. They just gradually suffer more than they were supposed to suffer. I want to say something about the shepherd model that I think is important for anyone who leads or teaches or serves. The most dangerous kind of failure in service is rarely the spectacular fall. It is the gradual drift, the slow inflation of what you allow, the quiet expansion of what you permit. The shepherd of the animal apocalypse did not wake up one morning and decide, "I will destroy more sheep than God commanded." He drifted. He became comfortable with a certain level of loss, then a slightly higher level, then higher, still, and at the end, when the record was opened, the difference between the initial command and the final performance was enormous. But it had accumulated so slowly that the shepherd himself may not have noticed the accumulation. The scribe was watching. The scribe does not miss gradual drift. This is a pastoral warning and a pastoral comfort simultaneously. Warning. The drift is the danger. Comfort. The scribe also records the resistance to drift, the moments when you held the line, when you protected more than you were required to protect, when you stayed when you could have fled. Both are written down, both sides of the ledger, the excess of harm and the excess of care. The animal apocalypse warns against the first. It implicitly honors the second. And tonight, in the holy night, you can afford to rest, because the scribe is writing both sides, and you do not need to manage the accounting. Lake Tana, in the highlands of northwestern Ethiopia, is a body of water approximately 84 kilometers long and 66 kilometers wide, roughly the size of the state of Delaware. It is the source of the Blue Nile. It is dotted with islands, and on those islands, for more than 1,000 years, some of the most important manuscript libraries in the world have been quietly maintained. The island monasteries of Lake Tana include Kibran Gabriel founded, according to tradition, in the 14th century, whose library contains what some scholars believe is the oldest surviving complete Ge'ez manuscript of one Enoch. Dega Estefanos, founded in the 15th century, whose treasury holds the mummies of 5 Ethiopian emperors alongside dozens of illuminated manuscripts. Ura Kidan Meiret, whose painted interior, with its vivid scenes from sacred history, includes multiple visual depictions drawn from one Enoch's cosmology. Naga Selassie, the church built on the order of Empress Mentawab in the 18th century, whose manuscript tradition includes extensive commentary on the Book of Dream Visions. These islands were chosen for the same reason as the Blue Nile Gorge monasteries. Accessibility by invitation only. You need a boat. You need a monk to allow you to land. You need a reason that the community accepts. The manuscripts on these islands are not behind bulletproof glass, in climate-controlled museum storage. They are in the hands of the living community, unwrapped on feast days, carried in procession, read aloud, in liturgical services that have changed very little since the 15th century. The most extraordinary discovery regarding the Lake Tana manuscripts came in the early 20th century, when European scholars, particularly from the German Institute of Ethiopian Studies, were given access to the Kibran Gabriel Library. What they found was not simply manuscripts. It was a continuous scholarly tradition, monks who could explain. In Ge'ez, the Undemta commentary, on every verse of 1 Enoch they were shown, not memorized explanations, living understanding, the kind of knowledge that comes from 1700 years of a community reading the same text across every generation. This is what the preservation of the animal apocalypse actually means. Not just physical survival, the parchment enduring the centuries, but intellectual survival, the understanding of what the text means, continuing in a living community that has never stopped reading it. The dead text would be an archaeological artifact. The living text, the text still read, still chanted, still commented on, is something else. It is a voice, and tonight, that voice has reached you. Across the water of Lake Tana, across the gorge of the Blue Nile, across 2,000 years of keeper monks in Debteras, who believed that what they were preserving was worth the cold, worth the isolation, worth the rope, worth the life. They were right. Let me tell you what the scribe writes at the very end of the animal apocalypse. Not the end of the vision, we covered that. The transformation, the white bull, the Lord entering the new house, the rejoicing. The end I am talking about is the very last verse of the animal apocalypse, the verse that closes the dream and brings Enoch back to the waking world. 1 Enoch 90 to 41-42. And those 3 who were clothed in white and had seized me by my hand, the ones who had taken me up at first, and the hand of that ram also seizing hold of me, they took me up and set me down in the midst of those sheep before the judgment took place. And those sheep were all white, and their wool was thick and pure, and all that had been destroyed and scattered, and all the beasts of the field, and all the birds of heaven, assembled in that house. And the Lord of the sheep rejoiced with great joy, because they were all good, and had returned to his house. Enoch is set down in the midst of the sheep, not outside the vision, not watching from a distance. He is placed inside it, in the middle of the gathered, whitened flock. The one who dreamed the dream is placed inside the dream's fulfillment. And then, the last line. And the Lord of the sheep rejoiced with great joy, because they were all good, and had returned to his house. The word translated rejoiced with great joy. In Ge, it is feseha yegube, a compound that carries the meaning of a joy too large for ordinary containers, a joy that overflows the space of a single celebration, a joy that is itself a kind of completion. The Lord of the sheep does not simply smile. The Lord of the sheep rejoices with great joy, because they are good, because they have returned. This is how the animal apocalypse ends. Not with judgment over the shepherds, though that happens. Not with the defeat of the wolves, though that happens. Not with the arrival of the white bull, though that happens. It ends with the Lord rejoicing, because his flock is home. I want you to hear that as you fall asleep. Whatever you have endured today, whatever distance you feel from the house, whatever scattering has happened in your life, the Lord of the sheep is watching. The scribe is writing. The transformation is already beginning. And at the end of the long journey, which may be measured in shepherd periods or in centuries or in the span of a single difficult night, the Lord will rejoice with great joy because you have returned, because you are good, because you are home. Sleep now. The house is lit. The door is open. The Lord is already rejoicing. You are already home. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, there is a prayer sung in the deep hours of the night that has no direct parallel in any other Christian tradition. It is called the Metsihafe Henok, the Book of the Night Sanctification, and it is performed by the priests in the inner court of the church, beginning at midnight and continuing until dawn. The congregation is not present. The liturgy is for the building, for the taboo, for the saints whose icons line the walls, for the dead who are commemorated in the memorials carved into the pillars, for the living who sleep in their houses nearby, not knowing that this is happening on their behalf. The text of the Metsihafe Henok draws extensively from the Psalter, the Anaphoras, and the Enochic commentary tradition. Several passages are explicitly drawn from the animal apocalypse. The intercessory prayer of Enoch in chapter 84, the description of the angelic scribe in chapter 89, and the final rejoicing of the Lord in chapter 90. These passages are woven into the midnight liturgy as part of the priest's intercession for the scattered flock, the living and the dead, the present and the absent, the ones who are suffering under a shepherd period that has exceeded its command. When a priest performs this liturgy at midnight, he is doing what Enoch did in the first dream, rising in the night, facing the direction of light, and praying for the remnant. Not because the situation has changed, not because the wolves have stopped, but because the prayer is the correct response to the vision, and the vision has always been the same. There is suffering in excess of what was permitted. The scribe has written it down, and the intercessor stands at the threshold, somewhere tonight while you are lying in your bed, in the walled garden of your sleep. A priest in a church in Ethiopia is performing the Metsihafe Henok. He is reading the passages from the animal apocalypse. He is naming the suffering of the scattered flock. He is asking for a remnant. And by the logic of the Ethiopian intercessory tradition, by the logic of the scribe's record, your name, wherever you are, is included in the category of scattered flock. You are being prayed for right now, at midnight, by a priest you will never meet, in a church you may never visit, in a language you may not speak, but the prayer is real. The taboo is present. The scribe is writing, and you are named. One of the subtlest and most fascinating aspects of the animal apocalypse is the way its animal assignments interact with the meaning of human names. In the Hebrew naming tradition, names are not arbitrary. They describe the essential character or destiny of the named. Adam means earth creature made from the ground. Eve means life giver, mother of all living. Cain means acquired, or gotten, reflecting Eve's declaration. I have acquired a man. Able means breath, or vapor, fleeting, ephemeral. The animal apocalypse's animal assignments mirror this naming logic. Adam is a white bull, earth creature, aligned with the original divine intention. Cain is a black bull, earth creature whose alignment has been darkened. Abel is a red bull, earth creature whose lifeblood the red is poured out. When the lineage shifts from cattle to sheep, the character of the named ones shifts from autonomy, the bull who walks his own path, to communal vulnerability, the sheep who needs the shepherd. And Abraham, the one whose name means father of many nations, becomes a single lamb, one lamb, from whom a whole flock will come. This is the symbolic grammar of the animal apocalypse at its most precise. The animal assigned is not just a code for the person. It is a commentary on what the person represents in the unfolding of the divine purpose. The white of Adam is the white of the beginning original alignment. The black of Cain is the darkening that his choice introduced. The lambness of Abraham is the vulnerability that makes great multiplication possible. The sheepness of Israel is the state of needing a shepherd, which makes the shepherd failure that much more significant. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, the Debteras, who studied the animal apocalypse, developed an elaborate system of name-to-animal correspondence that they applied not only to biblical characters, but to historical figures, saints, and in private devotional use, to individual persons seeking spiritual self-understanding. The system is not a horoscope. It is not predictive. It is a tool for symbolic self-examination. What animal does your essential character most closely resemble? Are you a white bull, walking in original alignment, or a darker one drifted from your source? Are you a sheep who needs the shepherd, or a wolf who has forgotten the original white? The answer to these questions is not final. The animal apocalypse itself insists on this. The wolves become white at the end. The darkening is not permanent. Whatever animal you find, when you look at yourself honestly, whatever color the mirror shows, the animal apocalypse says, you are not finished becoming. The transformation is available. The original white is not erased. It is waiting under whatever darkness has accumulated. And the scribe knows this. The Lord knows this. And the great joy at the end is partly because of this. Because the flock that comes home is not a perfect flock. It is a formally scattered, sometimes dark, often wounded flock. And the Lord rejoices anyway, with great joy. Because they have returned. You have been with me for a long time tonight. You came, some of you, for information, and I hope you found it. The animal code, the 70 shepherds, the Maccabean crisis, the Qumran fragments, the Ge'ez manuscripts. You came, some of you, for something harder to name. The feeling that, somewhere in the old texts, there is a word that fits the shape of what you are carrying. And I hope you found that too. But I want to say one final thing. Not as a scholar, not as a historian, but as a pastor. Sleep is a spiritual practice, not in the sense that it requires discipline or technique, in the sense that it is a form of surrender. Every night, you release your grip on consciousness. You let the thinking mind go quiet. You enter a state where you are not in control, where the dreaming mind, the sleeping body, the quieting spirit do things you are not directing. And in those hours, something happens that the waking mind cannot replicate. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition calls this something the visitation of rest and gaze, Siriet, La Helm, the order, or the pattern, that belongs to the dream state. Not every dream is a divine communication, but the state itself, the loosening of the nefs, The opening of the men phase is a state in which such communication becomes possible. Enoch received his vision there. The Psalms were composed there in the night watch, when the poet's defenses were low. The great prophetic dreams of Joseph and Daniel came there, and the slow restoration of the soul, the washing off of the day's accumulations, the quiet re-whitening that the sleep hours provide, happens there. The pastoral art of sleep is simply this: be willing to lie down, be willing to release the day, be willing to enter the state where you are not managing the outcome, be willing to be, for a few hours, a sheep who has no responsibilities, just a creature in the middle of the gathered flock, warm, surrounded, held. The Lord of the sheep does not need your vigilance while you sleep. He has the scribe for that. He has the angelic watch. He has the structure of the 70 shepherd periods, counted and recorded. He has the whole cosmic architecture of history moving toward its white conclusion. You don't need to hold any of that while you sleep. You just need to lie down and let it hold you. The Book of Dream Visions. The Animal Apocalypse, the entire Enochic tradition, ends with a flock at rest inside a house that will never need to scatter again. You are that flock. You are in that house, not metaphorically. The house is anywhere the Lord of the sheep has decided to be present, and the Lord has decided to be present here, in the quiet of your night, in the pause between your breaths, in the slow descent of your exhausted, faithful, beloved mind, into the dark where the scribe keeps writing, and the transformation keeps happening, and the white keeps returning. Sleep now, not because the world is safe, not because the wolves are gone, but because the wall is holding, and the lantern is lit, and the Lord is watching, and the scribe is writing, and you are, right now, in the middle of the becoming white. And that is enough. That has always been enough. Good night. There is a practice in the Ethiopian Orthodox monastic tradition called Serayat Lekal, the ordering of the word, in which the act of copying a sacred text is treated not as a mechanical reproduction, but as a form of prayer. The monk who copies does not simply sit down and transcribe. He prepares. He fasts. He washes his hands. He prays over the empty page before the first letter is written. He prays over the completed page before he turns it. And he prays when the copying is finished. A prayer of dedication, asking that the words he has copied will find the reader for whom they were destined. This practice, the prayerful copying of sacred text, is one of the reasons the Ge'ez manuscript tradition is so remarkably consistent. Monks who prayed before they wrote tended to write carefully. Monks who prayed over what they had written tended to notice errors. The discipline of prayerful copying produced the accuracy that the scholarship has now confirmed. The Ge'ez Enoch manuscripts are among the most internally consistent in the entire manuscript tradition. But the practice also means something else, something that the scholarship does not capture, but that the pastoral tradition holds. Every copy of the animal apocalypse that exists was made by a hand that prayed over it. Every word of the text that reaches you tonight passed through the fingers of someone who asked before writing, while writing, after writing, that this word would find the person who needed it. The monk did not know your name. He did not know what century you would live in. He did not know that the internet would exist, that recorded voices would be carried through the air, that you would lie in a bed in your time and your country, and hear what he spent his life preserving. But he prayed that it would find the person who needed it. And it has. When you hear the animal apocalypse tonight, when you fall asleep to the image of the walled garden, when the white bull walks through your dreaming mind, you are the fulfillment of that monk's prayer, not in a supernatural sense. in the most ordinary and most holy sense. One person worked for something, prayed for something, committed their life to something, and it reached you. That is how all the best things travel, not through force, through prayer and labor and time. The scribe wrote it down. The monk copied it with prayerful hands. Time carried it, and the evening found you. Enoch woke from his dream, the vision of the white bull, the transformed flock, the Lord rejoicing. All of it receded as the morning rose. He opened his eyes. He was in the ordinary world again. The pre-flood world. The world before the coming catastrophe. But he was changed. He had seen the whole ark. He had been held by the ones clothed in white. He had been set down in the middle of the flock. The flock gathered. The flock whitened. The flock finally home. And now he was back, in the ordinary world, with the knowledge of what was coming, and the knowledge of how it would eventually end. The Book of Dream Visions does not describe what Enoch did. In the days and years after the vision, it moves on to other texts, other sections of the Enochic library, but the Ethiopian tradition fills in the silence with a detail found in the Endempta commentary on the Book of Dream Visions. And when Enoch woke from the dream, he was silent for 3 days, and in those 3 days he neither ate nor spoke, and his family thought that he was ill. And on the 4th day, he sat with his children and his grandchildren, and he began to speak. 3 days of silence. Then the speaking begins. What Enoch said is not recorded, but the structure is clear. First, the vision. Then the silence in which the vision settles. Then the words that carry the vision to the ones who are not there. This is the pattern of all the best transmission. Vision. Silence. Words. Not vision and immediate explanation. Not vision and immediate publication. Vision. Silence. Words when the time is right, and the words are ready. Tonight you have received a vision. Not Enoch's vision, his was his own, but a reflection of it, a reading of it. A long night with the animal code and the 70 shepherds, and the great white bull, and the walled garden. You do not need to explain it tonight. You do not need to analyze it. You do not need to do anything with it. The silence is first. Let the vision settle in the silence. Let the helm do what it does. Let the holy night hold what you have received. The words will come when they are ready, when the 3 days are complete, when the vision has had time to become part of you, rather than something you observed from outside. That is Pastor Michael's final benediction to you. Not from me, from Enoch, from the monk whose prayerful hand wrote this, from the Debtera who taught it, from the tradition that refused to let it be forgotten. Sleep. Let the vision settle. Let the silence hold you. And when you wake, speak what has been given to you. Not loudly, not immediately, in the right time, to the right ears. The scribe is still writing, and your voice, when the time comes, is part of the record. Amen. And good night. For those who want to continue exploring the texts discussed tonight, if you have listened to the end, if you are still here in the quiet of the night, somewhere between the last words and the first sleep, I want to say one thing before the silence takes over. You chose to spend your night with an ancient text, with a dream about animals, with a vision that was almost lost, with a tradition that survived because ordinary people in ordinary monasteries made extraordinary choices to preserve it. That choice, your choice tonight, is also in the record. The scribe does not only write the shepherd periods. The scribe writes the sheep who came home, the ones who pressed play in the dark, the ones who listened, the ones who let the walled garden receive them. You are in the record. By name, by night, by this particular act of seeking. Go to sleep now. The record is complete. The Lord is watching. The transformation is ongoing, and you, exactly you, in exactly this moment, are part of the long story that ends in great rejoicing. Good night. Amen.